Brief delay, I'd like to open the January 30th meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission. Thanks to commissioners, members of the public, and our invited guests for joining us today. And I do hope that the transition to the use of Teams was smooth for all of you. As commissioner members and those that join us regularly know, we had some issues with WebEx and hope that Teams will be a better platform for us going forward. Jen, will you do a quick overview of how to use Teams, including how folks who are interested in providing public comments, which will happen around 10:50, can identify themselves if they haven't signed up already?
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Today for this meeting, we will be using Teams. As you are able to see the top row on your screen, you have the ability to chat, raise your hand, and react. You also have the ability to turn on your video camera and turn on your microphone. Please remember to keep your microphone off when you are not speaking, and please keep in mind that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And for those that are interested in providing public comment, we do hope that you can let us know what the topic is. We will be prioritizing comments regarding the vote that we will be taking on the request from OWEB and ODFW on use of natural and working lands funds. So if you can let us know what your topic is, that'll help us manage that set of conversations. And with that, we'll go to the next slide and kind of review the agenda. So today we have kind of three big topic areas. We will hear an overview of Governor Kotek's executive orders 2025-25, 26, and 29. We are very excited to hear about these and really appreciate the leadership of the governor on climate, and we'll have a great opportunity to talk to the folks that had a lot of the leadership in drafting these executive orders. Next, we'll talk about natural climate solutions and hear about the work that the staff and fellow agencies and the commission will be doing to update our recommendations regarding sequestration and storage goals for natural and working lands. And we'll hear from staff and our contractor about the Natural Climate Solutions metrics project. We'll take a short break and then go to public comments. And then we'll consider the request from ODFW and OWEB. Following that, we'll talk about transmission. It's been a big issue for us over the last many years, and we want to kind of take stock of where that conversation has been going. And then finally, do talk about next steps and where we think we're headed in our future meetings and adjourn. But before we go to the agenda, I just wanted to open the floor to updates and in particular recognize Commissioner Ackerman Munson, who wants to report on some work that the Treasurer's Office has been doing. So Commissioner Ackerman Munson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Commissioner McDonald. Chair McDonald, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little in and out, but
okay, I apologize. I'll be short. The Treasury Department just offered a progress report on our climate positive and net zero holdings. And it's the first of a multi-year reporting process that we're going to be doing from here all the way. The goal is to have our net zero goal met by 2050. And we contracted with S&P Global to look at our emissions. Granted, it's just 1 year of data, because of the lag time of how companies report. But from 2022 to 2023, our carbon intensity decreased by 50%. Again, that's just 1 year of data. So we're going to continue
Commissioner,
to
can
look
I
at that
just
trend.
interrupt
Mhm.
briefly? Jen, will you go to the next slide? Because I think we have a link and yeah, there we go.
Good, thank you.
Good.
I was going to, thank you. I was going to put that in as well. And so please look at that. I don't want to take too much time because I know I'm not presenting today, but please do review. It also shows that our climate positive investments, which are very focused in on the real assets portfolio, those doubled between 2022 and June of 2025. And our fossil fuel holdings over 2022 to 2025 went up in 1 year, but then have consistently gone down since 2023. So this is our first look at trying to catalog and track our emissions. And like I said, we're going to be doing this over many years. The Treasurer focused on passing the Climate Resilience Investment Act last session. And so that now is a law where we have to report to the legislature every 2 years on our progress. And we're very happy to do that. And so please, 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 everyone, once you've digested this information, I am very available, and so is the treasurer and anyone on our team, to answer any questions that may come up. I think this is a really important endeavor. My whole team at Treasury, they're amazing. They've been trying so hard to make this work. It's our first attempt. So if there's any mistakes or any problems or anything else, we can change them up. We can make it better in the future. And so thank you, Chair McDonald, for letting me let everybody know about this. And please, please circle back with me with any questions. I believe, Chair McDonald, that everyone has my email and contact information. It's the thing I love talking about, so I'll definitely make plenty of time for anyone who wants to follow up. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Representative Gamba?
Thank you, Chair McDonald, and good morning. That decrease in the fossil fuel holdings, how does that reflect the rather large portion of our holdings that are in private equity, which often or almost always are pretty obscure in what they're invested in?
I love that question, Representative Gamba, and I do hope we can talk more offline. The interesting thing is, if you look at scope 1 and 2 emissions, the private equity portfolio actually was not the highest emitting portfolio. However, Representative Gamba, I think we need to have eyes wide open here, and this is something we're thinking about more. We had to model I don't say we, S&P Global, because we wanted to include private equity in our review. A lot of these kind of reviews don't include private equity because we don't have the reporting information that we have in public equity. But S&P created a modeling program where they looked at all our private equity and they modeled it. So there's good and bad there, Representative Gamba, but at least we're including it, right? So it showed that private equity was not as high an emitter as real assets or public equity. But we need to keep thinking about that. Now, with scope 3 emissions, which we also include in this review, private equity did increase more than some of the others. So we're really sitting in this question right now of how, this challenge of modeling, we want to keep private equity. Some for other places, other pension funds just say, we're not going to include private equity at all in our emissions review, but we are. So it's imperfect, Representative Gamba, but it's an attempt to start tracking this in a positive way. And S&P Global does have an interesting modeling program where they are trying to make it. And we ourselves have complete visibility in the firms that we're holding. We just have that challenge of not being able to publicly release that information because of our status as an LP. But let's keep talking about this, Representative. I'd value a longer conversation because it's imperfect, but we're doing the best we can.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
Great question, and thank you for how thorough you're approaching this, and look forward to future conversations. Gabriella?
Good morning, Chair McDonald and members of the commission. I'm here on behalf of Gabriella Goldfarb, Environmental Public Health Section Manager here on behalf of the Oregon Health Authority. And the timing is a little bit off in many ways, but I wanted to give you all a heads up that we are going to be at long last issuing our Climate and Health in Oregon annual report. It is unfortunately the report for 2024. Typically, we issue that report mid-year, but this past year was very challenging in public health, and we were really derailed in a lot of ways. And so it has taken us longer than we hoped. So this is the data and stories for 2024. We do expect to be back on track and issue our Climate and Health in Oregon 2025 report by July. The delay is because a lot of health data, there's a lag in health data becoming available for a few months after the end of a calendar year. I will put in chat the link to the page where we post all of our reports. The most recent one you'll see is 2023. So again, within the next week or so, we should see the new one, and a press release will be coming out. And I just wanted to flag it for folks. So thanks.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And, there's such a strong connection between climate change impacts and health that it'll be great to see that report.
Yeah, and of course, we've been doing that since the governor's 2020 climate executive order, and this work is reinforced under the Governor Kotek's resilience executive order that you're going to be hearing about momentarily. Thanks.
And just to go back to the last topic and the Treasurer's Office, the great work that the Treasurer's Office has been doing. We do anticipate in future meetings this year to dig into public and private investment topics in greater detail. So it's great to have this as a starting point, but we'll come back to it later in the year as we're able to. Any other updates from commissioners? Thank you. Okay. Well, with that, we'll dig into our agenda, and I'm excited to welcome Amy Slusher, the Natural Resource Climate Advisor for Governor Kotek, and Chandra Ferrari, who's the Natural Resource Advisor, to brief us on the governor's executive orders. Unfortunately, Senior Natural Resource Advisor Jeff Huntington is not able to join us today, but we spoke before the meeting and he offered to come to future meetings to continue the discussion or to discuss other topics at the commission's request. So appreciate that. But Amy and Chandra were lead authors on much of this work, so I think we will be well informed today. And it's great. It was great to see Governor Kotek's leadership on climate action this fall. All three of these executive orders have a lot of tie-ins to the work of the commission, obviously, and we look forward to working with the governor's office and other agencies to support their implementation. Just as a reminder to commissioners, in March, we will be updating our work plan for the coming year. So please be listening for the goals that you hear and the work outlined in the executive orders, and kind of think about how we might be able to support the governor's office in helping to advance these important executive orders in advance of our March conversation. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to the two of you. And again, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Chair. I think we may have had a few slides. Are you all able to? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So Chair McDonald, members of the commission, thank you so much for having us today. For the record, my name is Chandra Ferrari. I'm a Natural Resources Policy Advisor with the Governor's Office, and I am accompanied here by my wonderful colleague, Amy, and I'll let her introduce herself as well before we get started.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back in front of the commission. excited to be here and excited to talk to you about Governor Kotek's climate executive orders.
Thanks, Amy. And yes, deep apologies that Jeff is unable to join us today. He is currently traveling out of state, and I know looks forward to seeing you all again in the future. So as you noted earlier, Chair, late last year, Governor Kotek issued a series of executive orders that broadly are intended to increase the adoption and implementation of climate and energy resiliency strategies, and provide our many natural resource agencies and boards and commissions with a unified vision that can really help us connect and prioritize our work, and really, for us, provides the North Star, if you will. And this is particularly valuable, I think, here in Oregon, as you all probably know that we have 14 natural resource agencies, and we have 30 plus boards and commissions that are all doing really important natural resource related work in Oregon. And I should point out that they're all doing that work with a very small slice of the overall state budget. So with this really vast and important body of work ongoing at our agencies and at our boards and commissions, and with limited resources, and with the need to really think about and manage the change that we know is here and is anticipated in the future, having that broad vision and approach to help us streamline and focus our energies and our resources was really important to the governor. So that's really what kind of drove the issuance of these executive orders. So with that, today I'm going to be talking to you about Executive Order 2526, and then Amy will follow with Executive Orders 2529 and 2525. So if I could please move to the next slide. So Executive Order 2526 really is about taking urgent action to promote the resilience of our national working lands and waters and communities, recognizing that healthy communities really do rely on having resilient natural and working lands as well. And there's a couple underpinnings to this executive order, and you'll see a lot of this that's built up in the whereas clauses. And I'm just going to kind of walk through the main components of the executive order, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions too at the end. But if you do have questions for me as I'm presenting, I'm happy to take those as we go as well. So the underpinnings of the executive order really are, they're premised on a couple of things. Number one, and I know I don't need to tell this commission this, but recognizing the value of our natural and working lands for the numerous benefits they provide to Oregonians, whether those be economic, environmental, cultural, social, carbon sequestration, you name it, right? We know there's plenty of benefits. We also know that we're experiencing change in Oregon. We're seeing changes to our precipitation and our snowpack and the severity and occurrence of wildfire and a lot of other climate-induced changes that can impact the ability of these very special resources to provide these values over time. So we need these areas to be resilient to change so that they can continue to provide the many benefits for future generations. Additionally, given the stakes and importance of our natural and working lands and communities, we really can't afford to be misaligned in this work. And so this EO really seeks to move us forward in a coordinated and strategic fashion, and also recognizes that we can't do it alone, right? So there's an element of recognizing that we need to be collaborating in a broad way and with all of our partners to really move the needle. And so those are kind of the underpinnings of the executive order. The executive order is structured with a couple key buckets of work that it's anticipated that our agencies will advance. And so I'll speak through those. And if we could move to the next slide. Great, thank you. So number one, the executive order recognizes that for us to advance work, it's important for us to have a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve, even if this is on a broader level. And so from the beginning, one of the most immediate actions that the executive order contemplates is that our agencies are going to develop resiliency attributes to guide further actions in the executive order. And what that means is coming up with a set of characteristics that what resilient lands and waters are. If we are trying to secure lands and waters, what does that mean, right? What are we striving to do? And we have asked our representatives, our directors from ODFW and OEB to really lead this work with an interagency team and to produce a deliverable that's hopefully anticipated to come later spring that again would be kind of the guiding bench posts, if you will, for the rest of the EO's execution. And so we're very excited about this work. It's in progress, the process for developing these attributes, and there'll be definitely more to come on updating on the specifics of this over time. But this was kind of one of the first items that we have been trying to advance. The second category of work is, well, I'll put the second and third kind of together first, where we're really looking to advance, again, actions that will protect and expand high resiliency areas, right? Our natural and working lands that really are serving as resiliency anchors looking out into the future. And so for working lands, what that meant to us was really thinking about the way the state agencies currently offer tools, resources, programs that support good stewardship. So we can that support the generation of diverse products, whether it's from agricultural lands or from our timber resources or from our oceans, and thinking about how they can do this in a way that maximizes other benefits as well. And so where we have tools, resources, programs that connect into this, we're taking a hard look at those. We're thinking about where they can either be streamlined, how do we increase the pace and scale of their use, trying to identify where maybe we're not hitting the mark and why that might be. So, making sure that we really have the right toolbox and that those tools are being used at scale, and thinking about what we can do to advance tools in this space. So that's the first category. The second category is thinking about our natural lands and waters. And we have a broad goal in there to achieve protection, conservation, connection, restoration of 10% of our lands and waters within 10 years. And there's some additional language in there that suggests that, not all actions are created equal, right? That we need to be prioritizing this work in a way that's, again, really thinking about resiliency, which areas are most likely to be resilient with additional work. Where do we already have these resiliency anchor areas that we should be thinking about making sure those don't degrade? And how do we, again, maximize the amount of benefit that we're getting from our actions? Because I really think the goal of this is to deliver the most climate resilience with every dollar, with every action that we take going forward. And so we do have that framing in mind for our agencies, but we, again, expect that the actions that they take are going to ultimately tie back to the attribute development process. And that's why, or the attributes that are developed. And so that's why we're doing that piece first. The next category of work is lead by example. And what this means is where state agencies own or manage lands and waters, that we are going to be identifying and implementing climate resiliency strategies as well, while also continuing to serve current management objectives, right? So this is about, again, as it says in the name, we're leading by example. We're showing what we can do here to derive as much benefit out of our actions and still serve our current management objectives for whatever our land and waters are. So it might be that we're managing a wildlife area, or we're managing a hatchery facility, or we're managing a park. And we're still going to, do everything to manage well for those purposes. But then we're also going to be thinking about where we can be innovative in terms of climate resiliency. So that's the third bucket. And then the last bucket is community and wildfire resilience. And this is a very large bucket. And we have a few discrete things within this bucket, recognizing that there's a lot of other work that can cleanly fit within here as well. But the first thing under the community resiliency category is to advance work to develop a plan for resilient Oregon. And this is work that's really led by our state resilience officer, who's also within the governor's office. And it's a community-led process. The state resiliency officer is convening regional forums to hear from communities about what they need to protect their communities from climate threats. And this can include all manner of threats, right? Catastrophic wildfire, flooding, et cetera. And then that's kind of feeding into a statewide group that is making sure that the communities have the tools and strategies they need to implement resilient actions. And so it's a broad-based community level, community-driven effort that's ongoing right now. And clearly natural and working lands and waters is a piece of that conversation, but the conversation is much broader. And so we are working with our resilience officer to make sure that we're coordinated around this work and there's the right touch points between our agencies and the effort. And that will evolve too as that process plays out. So the last piece is wildfire resiliency. And clearly this is a major and very important bucket. And some of the things that we have identified in this executive order include advancing our 20-year landscape resiliency strategy and trying to increase the pace and scale of actions that are identified already within that strategy. And then also expanding the pace and scale of prescribed burning, and of course, doing that in a way that's being very thoughtful about the impacts to community health. And then also taking actions that we can to build fire-adapted communities, defensible space requirements, fire-resistant building materials, things like that. So that concludes the description of kind of the substantive buckets of work, but there's also a section within the executive order, and you'll see a similar section within Amy's executive orders as well, that talks about how we're planning to do the work. So what we're planning to do and how we're planning to do it. And what we have contemplated is for this work is that we want to be really well coordinated. We want our agencies talking, we want our boards and commissions talking. Kind of one of the reasons that we're starting this conversation early with you all today, recognizing I don't have tons to share, right, on implementation quite yet, but I want you to know what we're planning. We want to be able to come back for frequent touch points so we can continue this conversation and dialogue. But structurally, what we've set up is that we have an interagency leadership team with representatives from all of our natural resource agencies that's really leading the charge, if you will, for implementation of the executive order. And what's contemplated is that each agency is going to be developing a work plan to identify how the agency is going to be advancing the goals of the executive order. Those work plans are going to be shared with boards and commissions before adoption so that there is conversation and dialogue that happens around those. And additionally, we are going to be establishing an advisory group that is made up of natural resource board and commission members to, again, also help advise on the implementation of the executive order over time. The work plans are supposed to also be developed on a cadence that they will inform the budget planning process and legislative development process. It's a little bit misaligned right now just because of when we issued. So we are trying to do some things a little bit quicker, and we might have to work with that timeline for this budget cycle. It's not going to be a perfect symmetry, but for next cycles, we should be hitting that pretty cleanly. And then the last thing I just note is, we are wanting to be thoughtful about how we track progress under this executive order. And so we are thinking about, not only will you see some of that in the work plans that are being generated and kind of the report outs from those work plans, but we're also looking at agencies' KPMs or their key performance measures and thinking about whether they really are reflective of where we need to go as a state now. Are they really the sorts of metrics that we should be tracking to best understand where we are and where we want to be? So that will be a process that we're trying to undertake over the next year or two, as well as taking a hard look at those KPMs. And I think that probably wraps up some of the process pieces that I wanted to make sure we talked about. And then just in conclusion, really, this executive order is really about understanding that we are encountering change, more change is coming. We want to recognize and capture the value of natural and working lands and waters in a way that can really drive coordinated policy, can help us collectively prioritize actions that will be most meaningful to securing the resiliency, maximizing the benefits of actions, expanding and securing our toolkit for responding to change, and finally creating the space for innovation, partnership, and dialogue around these issues. And clearly this commission has been a space for that as well. And so we're very excited that you all will be a part of the implementation efforts for this executive order, and we expect a lot of dialogue to come, efforts to come. I'm happy to have more conversation. And I don't know if you would like to talk about this executive order now, or if you'd rather hear from Amy and then open it up for questions, but we're happy to do whatever makes the most sense.
I think it might make sense to have any clarifying questions or comments. And I appreciated your comments and the more specific explanation of the last bullet item, because I wasn't sure how much to kind of think about those two things together versus as kind of separate and additive pieces. So, knowing how much of an issue flooding and storm surge is on the coast, great to know that that's part of the community work as well as the really important work on wildfire resilience. And just one question for me, and then I'll open it up. Did I hear that you're anticipating that some of the planning for this, that much of the baseline planning for this will happen this spring? Is that
Yes, Chair McDonald. So what we're hoping to have by this spring, and we'll be able to provide probably more definitive timelines soon, is the development of the attributes. And then some of the early stages of work plan development. Just because, we are already thinking about budgets for 27, 29. Ideally, you have the attributes first, right? You're able to go through some of the other steps in the EO, like we do need to think about baseline and, where we're measuring from when we're thinking about 10 by 10, things like that. And that's to come to this year, but things might be a little bit out of sequence for those first work plans. We're still kind of figuring that out. But the spring deadline is for the attributes, because it really is kind of the first stage and the driver of the subsequent steps.
I see a lot of opportunity to connect this work with the natural climate solutions work and activity and community impact metrics that the Oregon Department of Energy and the Commission are working on. So it's exciting to see all of this work.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Thank you, Chair.
Any questions before we move on to the next one? We can always come back and ask questions.
If I might, Chair, I just wanted to note, just in response to your comments too, that we definitely see very strong alignment between the work of the commission and the deliverables that you're producing now, and of course the goals and process of this executive order. And there was specific language to contemplating that the ODFW and OWEB, who are convening a team, are coordinating really closely with ODO and the Natural Working Lands program to make sure that there is consistency, or that I mean, things should be working together. Like, we're not doing things at cross purposes, right? Like, this is all work that helps one another and feeds off one another. So I think just wanted that to be clear, that it was a specific call out in this executive order as well.
Yeah, I was really glad to see that and really appreciate that you're trying to create this North Star for all the natural resource agencies. Commissioner Apter.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the presentation. This is such exciting work, and just echoing Chair McDonald's appreciation at the outset for the governor's leadership here. I have a kind of a comment and question. I really appreciate you calling out that you all are, state agencies are implementing these directives using existing budget and resources. And a lot of what this commission has been, I would say, increasingly thinking about is, how can we advance innovative financing tools given, first federal funding reductions, and now, an ever constrained state budget environment. So I want to call out, there is legislation that Senator Golden is introducing or reintroducing this session. It's the Climate Resilience Superfund bill. This is, one proposal of, I would say a suite of potential options to help support dedicated long-term funding for wildfire mitigation and other climate resilience investments, including in natural working lands. So curious how you all are thinking about, in this budget constrained environment, could, tools like this in terms of helping to support your all's implementation work and the priorities outlined in this executive order.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter. I appreciate the question. So I can't speak directly to that bill, and I apologize. I'm not well versed in it. But what I can say is that we certainly, for natural resources, we are in a position to need to be creative with innovative funding solutions. And what we are hoping this executive order can do is, again, to solidify the value of what we're doing, right? What the product that we're generating in terms of resilient natural lands and waters, it's something that everybody should feel invested in, right? And see themselves in. Like we want this is what Oregon is, right? It's having these lands and waters around that can, again, provide these benefits. And the more invested folks get in that and recognize the threats that are currently existing, to these functioning spaces without additional investment. Like it's a case building exercise, if you will, too, that can help hopefully generate interest and attention around the topic and help prompt the conversations that get us to innovative funding solutions, which could be through state programs and maybe other partners as well that might be, interested in partnering with the state to get to some of these outcomes. So I definitely think it's really relevant. We have strong interest in thinking about diversified funding sources for all of our natural resource programs, and particularly ones in execution of these objectives. But I don't have anything more specific than that right now.
Great question, and certainly an area, as you mentioned, that we'll be digging into more. I'm going to suggest, rather than taking more questions just on this executive order, that we turn things over to Amy, hear about the other two important executive orders, and then come back to questions, and we can take those on either one. So welcome, Amy. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks. Could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And I'm actually going to cover 2525 and 2529, but I'm going to be really brief about Executive Order 2525. For the record, my name is Amy Slusher, and I am Governor Kotek's Climate and Energy Policy Advisor. And as I noted, it's really a pleasure to be back in front of the Commission today. I would like to talk about the Governor's Executive Orders 2525 and 2529, which establish the Governor's policy priorities and direction to executive branch agencies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and advancing the transition to an affordable, clean energy future. These executive orders intersect closely with the Commission's work in several ways, but I'll just make note of a few of the primary intersections that we see. First, nearly every agency that is subject to the directives of these executive orders are represented on the Commission. Second, many of the executive orders provisions, particularly in EO 2529, apply directly to the Commission. So it's our expectation that the Commission will provide a space for reporting and discussing progress of these orders, troubleshooting implementation challenges, providing input on work plans and draft work products to inform agency findings and recommendations, and then also to provide an opportunity for public engagement and dialogue on executive order implementation efforts by the various agencies that are represented on the Commission. So we're very much hoping that the Commission can stay engaged as we and agencies work through our implementation efforts and track progress. So briefly, I will shift gears and talk a little bit about Executive Order 2525. This executive order was a direct response to HR 1, in which Congress reduced the timelines for clean energy projects to qualify for federal tax credits. And these federal tax credits, in some cases, are worth a considerable amount of money, like 30 to 50% of projects' upfront costs. So that's a big deal. So Governor Kotek wanted to take action to set near-term direction to accelerate siting approvals for solar and wind projects that need to start construction by July 4th of this year in order to qualify for federal tax credits. So this executive order directs multiple executive branch agencies that are involved in siting and permitting decisions to accelerate and prioritize the review of applications and application approvals where appropriate for solar and wind projects that need to meet that July 4th deadline. These directives apply to Department of Land Conservation and Development, Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Forestry, Department of State Lands, the Department of Transportation, the Public Utility Commission, and the State Historic Preservation Office. So those are the general directives are for these agencies to review their processes and do what they can to accelerate their reviews and approvals. The executive order also includes specific directives for the Energy Facility Siting Council, which is housed within ODO, to accelerate site certificate reviews for projects that need to commence construction by July 4th. And I'm happy to answer questions about that executive order, but I'd also want to make sure we have enough time to cover Executive Order 2529. So unless anyone has any questions, I'll move forward to 2529.
That sounds great.
Okay, next slide, please. So the Executive Order 2529 builds off of the themes of 2525, but sets a much longer term direction for agencies to help advance clean energy deployment across the state and help the state, or I guess maintain momentum towards building a resilient clean energy economy in Oregon that is built on a backbone of clean, affordable, and reliable energy. So the executive order aims to achieve those objectives through sort of three broad buckets of actions. And the first category of action is to directs agencies to prioritize implementation of the Oregon Energy Strategy pathways that were developed by the Oregon Department of Energy. So these directives call for agencies, specifically DAS, ODO, DEQ, DLCD, ODOT, the PUC, and the Climate Action Commission, notably, to align their decisions and activities and investments to advance the 5 least cost pathways that were identified in the Oregon Energy Strategy to achieve Oregon's energy and climate objectives while also maintaining affordability and reliability. The executive order directs agencies to act within their existing authorities and budgets. So in other words, it's really calling on agencies to do what they can with the tools and resources that they currently have. So the 5 pathways identified in the energy strategy are to advance energy efficiency across all sectors, support investment in clean electricity infrastructure, increase strategic investment or strategic electrification of vehicles and buildings, increase the supply and use of low carbon fuels. And that directive specifically calls on the Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Quality Commission to extend and strengthen the state's low carbon fuel standard to require a 50% reduction in carbon intensity by 2040. And then the final pathway is to strengthen resilience across all levels of the energy system. And for this directive, the EO calls on the Public Utility Commission to establish a process and methodologies for valuing the resiliency benefits of utility investments in clean energy resources. So that's the first sort of bucket of actions called for in EO 2529. The second bucket calls for agencies to take action to get clean energy projects built. And these directives call on agencies to develop and implement a coordinated, proactive approach to streamline agency processes for siting and permitting clean energy projects, and it with a specific focus on projects that contribute to affordability and reliability. So within this bucket, the EO first directs agencies to reduce barriers to clean energy deployment. And this specifically applies to ODO in coordination with the PUC and DLCD. These agencies are directed to evaluate barriers to siting and permitting clean energy resources and then recommend strategies to accelerate deployment while balancing the need for public participation. And ODO is directed to submit a report with its findings and recommendations to the governor by September 1st of 2026. This action really sort of builds on EO 2525 and extends it out further than the timelines within the clean energy tax credit expiration deadlines by really just saying, if we can streamline processes, if we can move faster, let's do it. Then the EO directs the Department of Land Conservation and Development to do an analysis to accelerate clean energy deployment through Oregon's land use planning framework. And so the executive order directs DLCD to evaluate and identify opportunities to accelerate development within this planning framework and report its findings and recommendations to the governor by July 1st of 2026. Next, the executive order directs agencies to streamline clean energy siting, and this is very sort of closely related to the first directive in this category to reduce barriers to clean energy deployment, but it expands and applies to multiple agencies. ODO, DEQ, DOGAMI, the PUC, and the Commission are directed to evaluate existing policies and processes and recommend strategies for streamlining siting and permitting reviews and approvals for clean energy projects, and to report findings and recommendations to the governor by September 1st of 2026. I know this is a lot of information to keep track of. There are a lot of deadlines, there are a lot of agencies, and a lot of these directives maybe sound similar. So if the executive order itself is not already available on the commission's webpage, we're happy to share that with the commission members. The next directive is for the PUC in partnership with ODO and the governor's office to identify pathways to facilitate development of clean energy infrastructure by convening public and private partners to evaluate progress in achieving Oregon's clean energy targets that were established by HB 2021, and to identify opportunities for expanding public-private partnerships to further support clean energy deployment and in an effort to help achieve those clean energy targets. Next, the executive order directs the Department of Energy in partnership with the PUC and the governor's office. So essentially the same agencies as the last directive, but with different leads, to develop a framework for strategic transmission siting. And so ODO will be taking the lead on this, and they'll be evaluating and proposing a framework to strategically accelerate transmission development to support clean energy deployment across Oregon. And then finally, the executive order establishes a goal for deploying energy storage. So it establishes a goal of deploying at least 8 gigawatts of energy storage in Oregon by 2045. And based on the current site certificate queue, we think that this goal is ambitious yet also achievable in the next 20 years. And then finally, the final bucket of action in EO 2529 is really built around helping the state build a resilient clean energy economy. And so these directives apply to Business Oregon, Odo, DEQ, Dogami, the PUC, and the Commission. And they direct the agencies and commissions to align programs, decisions, and investments to help the state grow a clean energy economy that can attract and support climate-friendly industries, create jobs, and align with Oregon's climate goals. So these directives call for agencies to develop and foster and support public-private partnerships to advance clean energy technologies and development in the state, and to evaluate emerging clean energy technologies by assessing opportunities to deploy and support new clean energy technologies like enhanced geothermal or super hot rocks that can play a role in Oregon's clean energy future. So those are the primary directives in EO 2529. And I know that I just threw a lot of information at you, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of that. But before I get to questions, I'll just briefly kind of go over some of the accountability and coordination provisions in the executive order. So as I've gone through, I've tried to kind of track which agencies are subject to which directives, which I know is complicated and can be hard to keep track of. In addition to the agencies I already mentioned, the executive order also specifically asks for certain agencies to engage in consultation and information sharing. So even if these agencies aren't subject to the directives in the EO, they're asked to provide input and share information and really help other agencies in their implementation efforts. And those agencies are Business Oregon, ODFW, Department of State Lands, Department of Transportation, the Parks and Rec Department, and the Water Resources Department. So all agencies that are subject to the executive order's directives, whether they're specific directives or more general directives, are expected to track and report their progress to their respective boards and commissions. And this is where we think that the Climate Action Commission can play a very important and valuable role here by providing a forum for reporting progress and providing input. The executive order also asks certain agencies, specifically Odo, DEQ, and the PUC, which are subject to most of the directives in the executive order, to develop biennial plans that include targets and metrics for tracking progress and informing their implementation priorities. And these priorities may also be reflected in the governor's recommended budget. And so Odo, DEQ, and the PUC are directed to present their plans to their respective boards and commissions, and we include the Climate Action Commission in that list of boards and commissions. And then overlaying all of this, the governor's office is working with agencies to also track and coordinate implementation efforts within and between agencies. And so we are also viewing the Climate Action Commission as an important partner in that work as well. So
Thank you, Amy.
Happy to answer questions.
That was a lot of food for thought for our work planning next month, or in March. And really exciting work that is outlined. Commissioner Dodson.
Great, thank you. And thanks for the presentations. Very, very interesting. I wanted to ask a little bit about the strategic efforts on transmission. And obviously, we're just in a situation in which so many energy projects have been permitted and approved and are ready to go, but they await BPA's action to get on the grid. And obviously, the governor doesn't control BPA, but it seems like this is a critical piece of the puzzle that really needs to be focused on. I think the executive order creates space for that engagement. And I was just wondering if you could say a few more words about how you see that happening.
Yes, thank you for that question. And you really hit the nail on the head when it comes to transmission development in the state. We have, because the governor doesn't have authority over BPA, we obviously couldn't mention BPA directly in the executive order, but what we have been doing is reaching out and working with them more directly to really get a better understanding of what their processes look like, what their timelines are for developing and approving projects, and identifying opportunities where the state and BPA can work together and better align our processes to help all of these decision makers review information and ultimately make approvals as quickly as possible. And I will say BPA has been very receptive and has been so far a really great partner in those efforts. They have identified areas where they would like to work more closely with specific agencies to help their approval processes move along more quickly. And I'm more than happy to help. I would expect that they would be happy to come and present to the commission on their efforts. I mean, they really have they're doing a lot of work in this area. The queue of projects requesting transmission service and interconnections is long, and they're trying to improve their processes and develop new processes so that they can move more quickly on those decisions. And those processes are going to take a little bit of time to develop and implement. And they've been doing a lot of coordination in this area, and I'm happy to help reach out to them and connect them with the commission if you'd be interested in inviting them to present on their progress.
Good question, and thank you for the offer, Amy. I'm going to borrow a few minutes from our next topic, but I think after Representative Gamba and Commissioner Thorndike, then we should move on. But Representative Gamba.
Thank you again. Great presentations, Amy. That what heartens me about that EO is that it's more action oriented than often EOs are. I hope some of you, and I know some of you because I saw you there, were able to attend the OPB event last night. But I think the point was made very publicly that Oregon is famous for having great plans and great goals and great ideas and lots of things on shelves. And we're 47th in the nation for actually building renewable energy. And I think a lot of that is due to BPA. But not all of it. And so my encouragement would be that we lean stronger towards actual substantive action to get these things done over more process. I think to a very large degree, the agencies know what needs to be done. And I think there are opportunities to the last question. I think, honest to God, I believe to my soul that we are more likely to stand up a transmission authority and build our own transmission line before BPA will get off the dime. Just 2 years of working with BPA. So that would be my hope, is that the work that goes forward out of this is very action oriented, so that we are actually seeing electrons flowing rather than more really good ideas that we don't achieve.
Thank you for those
No, go ahead.
Thank you for those comments, Representative Gamba. I think that the governor very much shares your views in that area. As we were developing these orders, one of her overarching instructions was not to include just performative measures and goals. Like she's not interested in just establishing executive orders that create like flowery objectives that can actually be implemented. She wants to see real progress on the ground. She wants that progress to be measurable, and she wants accountability. And we tried to incorporate those mechanisms into these executive orders. She provided, they are her executive orders, and I want to make sure that everybody on the commission really recognizes, like, we did not just produce these documents and give them to her and she signed off. She was incredibly active in the process. She added her own, she added directives. She cut out things that we were asking for. She wants to see action, and she wants us to continue to provide her with updates on how agencies are progressing in their implementation efforts. And so that's all to say that I really appreciate your comments, and I think they're very much aligned with the intention of these executive orders.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thorndike, is your question something that we could maybe take offline, or would you like to go ahead and?
Oh, let me just do a quick, it's just kind of
Okay,
sort of offline on the, I don't know how much is out there in terms of public-private partnerships, but just an observation that to the extent there is a potential obstacle out there, especially to get things done quickly, is last year the legislature expanded the potential application of BOLI wages, the prevailing wage, to anything that's built off-site for a project, and the rules haven't been promulgated. This could have disastrous effects on housing stuff and a bunch of other things, but it's a real uncertainty out there, and to the extent there's a public-private partnership that would involve more than $750,000 of public funds. It's just absolutely going to be frozen up right now until people know what it means in terms of offsite components. I mean, it could be like a wind turbine built in Denmark or something. It's just something, BOLI wasn't mentioned as one of those agencies who could have an impact on this, but they might. So I'm just tossing that out there.
Thank you for that information.
Great.
And I will also follow up with you to better understand the issue. So thank you. I appreciate that. Great. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today and offering to come back. There were obviously lots of specifics that we talked about that the commission can help support, and we're excited to do that. And we'll be I'll be listening to the recording again to make sure that I captured everything as we go into our work planning in March. So thank you again. And with that, we'll move to our next agenda item. And next slide, please. So in House Bill 3409, passed in 2023, we were collectively the Commission, Oregon Department of Energy, and a number of other agencies tasked with creating 4 primary deliverables. And today we're going to hear about the last 2 deliverables. And before I turn it over to staff, I just wanted to turn things over to Director Benner to just say a few words about the completion of the first 2 deliverables. Director Benner.
Thanks, Chair McDonald. If we could go to the next slide, you can see the pictures of the covers of these 2 deliverables. We're really proud at Odo. This is a new area of work for us, and the team worked really hard over the past few years on these deliverables. So we are really pleased to let you know that we released the Land-Based Net Carbon Inventory and Natural Climate Solutions Workforce Study in December. I think like December 31st. It was right there towards the end. And we were able to share both reports with the legislature. They were the first of their kind for Oregon, and they really would not have been possible without the input and partnership from the Commission and the other agencies involved across state government. Really, really grateful for the assistance. As Chair McDonald said earlier, there are lots of opportunities to connect this work with the executive order that the governor's office just talked about, especially 285-26, where we're really looking at capturing the value of natural and working lands to drive coordinated policy. And the land-based net carbon inventory really looks at one of the really key values of this land, which is carbon sequestration. So I hope the information in these reports will help the land managing agencies, workforce-focused agencies, tribal nations, municipalities, and other partners in their work to advance nature-based climate action. The Odo team's happy to brief you further on the reports and answer any questions. And we think this will be foundational for the state's work going forward. So thanks for the opportunity, and I will turn it over to Liz.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank
Director
you.
Vetter. Good morning, commissioners. It's exciting to have that initial information, and there's so much work still ahead of us. So please do let us know if you'd like to talk further about those reports. As the chair mentioned, next slide. As the chair mentioned, we'll be presenting two natural climate solutions topics today. First, we'll share some key questions that we're considering while we gather information that will inform your decision making on the goal this year. And then we'll introduce the NCS and metrics analysis consultant, RTI International, and some of their initial work on this project. The information from this analysis will help establish a standard tracking infrastructure for NCS implementation in the state, and will also help inform the goal that we are creating. So starting off with the goal discussion, setting goals for the land sector has been considered important for over a decade now. More emphasis was placed on this work at the state level in 2018 when the then 17 states in the U.S. Climate Alliance signed on to the Natural Working Lands Challenge, designed to better incorporate the sequestration power of lands and help amplify adaptation benefits in climate action arenas. Setting a goal or goals requires several steps shown on the slide, all of which we will be considering or have already begun as part of the statutory requirements in HB 3409. We will share more about each of these steps in March. Next slide. Also, as the chair mentioned, the statute directs Odo and the commission and in coordination with the agencies to establish sequestration and storage goals with the ability to update the goal as we have more information. The same section of statute directs us to use activity metrics and a baseline to track progress towards that goal. Next slide. So Jason and I are pulling together information for several key questions that we've identified to contribute to the staff recommendation you'll receive and help us identify various methods to approach goal making. Some of the questions are listed here. Over the next few slides, Jason and I will share some information related to each question just to kind of get us started, to provide some context of where we are starting and what we're considering. Next slide. First, as we consider what standards or guidance exist, this is one example from the U.S. Climate Alliance on goal creation. Some of the project work we are undertaking meets some of them, like number 6, and the statute allows opportunities to recalibrate or improve the goal, but we'll need to consider elements 1 through 3, no matter which approach or framework we adopt for goal making. Jason?
Thank you, Liz. Next slide, please. So good morning, commissioners. Nice to speak with you all again today. I'm going to spend a few moments refreshing everyone's history on Oregon's existing goals related to natural and working lands. So the 2021 Natural and Working Lands proposal included recommended goals to the governor's office in response to Executive Order 2004. The recommendation made the goals separate from, in addition to, Oregon's sector-based emissions reduction goals. The recommendation was based on research on the potential from natural climate solutions that could likely be accomplished in Oregon, and the rationale for the goals was explicitly listed in the proposal. The goals explicitly were to use natural and working lands to sequester an additional 5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year by 2030, and an additional 9.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year by 2050. Next slide, please.
Compared to what?
I'm sorry. I'll keep going. So there are several frameworks for thinking about climate mitigation. that we want to review with you and to continue to talk about this history. So in the past, Oregon has considered pursuing net zero, and it may consider net zero again in setting new natural climate solutions goals. Net zero is defined as achieving a balance between anthropogenic emissions and removals of greenhouse gases. Recognizing that a goal of net zero does not address legacy carbon in the atmosphere, net zero is often used as a milestone on the way to set net negative or net removal of atmospheric carbon goals. The Commission has considered net zero and net negative goals in the Roadmap to 2030 and Biennial Report for 2024. You can see in bold italics on this slide recommendations 2C and 2E from the Roadmap to the 2030 report. Recommendation 2C is to achieve net zero emissions as soon as practical and no later than 2050, and to achieve and maintain net negative emissions thereafter. Recommendation 2E is to enable periodic updates to assessment of net zero and net negative based on available science, and to recommend updated goals to the legislature as needed based on the evaluation. And just as a reminder, natural climate solutions are currently the only viable strategy for impactful carbon removal in the atmosphere. Geochemical and technological solutions like direct carbon capture require further development before they can be deployed at scales required to bridge the gap between our emissions, legacy carbon in the atmosphere, and our climate goals. I'll talk a bit about that more on the next slide. So, because I'm a visual person, I often return to this early diagram that we reproduced of the climate bathtub, and we've shown it to you all before. Specifically, this one is focused on net zero. And so if your bathtub is the atmosphere, it is currently being filled with carbon from the fossil fuel emissions in that faucet in the top left there. Because the drain, which is largely made up of the natural working lands contribution to removals, is not currently able to remove carbon at nearly the same rate. So net zero is achieved when your emissions rate equals your removals rate, or when the drain is operating as fast as the faucet. At net zero, the water level in the tub, however, remains the same. We would continue to live in a warmer climate that would continue to do damage to people and ecosystems. Net negative occurs when the drain is flowing faster than the faucet. This would allow us to lower the level of carbon in the tub to a safer value. Next slide, and I think I'm passing it back to Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I just find that visual so helpful. So we have been gathering, we've also been gathering information on what other jurisdictions have done to inform this work. First, it's helpful to put Oregon's work in context of the broader climate effort. So as we know, the international treaty that the world has joined together on is the Paris Agreement. And since 2020, countries have been submitting their national climate action plans known as nationally determined contributions. Each successive NDC is meant to reflect an increasingly higher degree of ambition compared to the previous version. In their NDCs, countries communicate actions they will take to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in order to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. Countries also communicate in their NDCs actions they will take to build resilience to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Globally, the land sector accounts for 18.4% of global emissions, and conserving and managing land differently has a significant role to play. The U.S. submitted their most recent NDC in December 2024. And while we have paused participation in this agreement, as you see, the U.S. does not have a formal goal for natural and working lands. However, natural and working lands sequester approximately 714 million metric tons of carbon a year, equivalent to approximately 12% of the U.S.'s annual greenhouse gas emissions, and have a significant role to play in reaching our economy-wide net GHG goals, as well as help the U.S. build resilience to climate change. And while we don't have a specific national goal for the land sector was included in the U.S.'s long-term strategy to get to net zero by 2050. Next slide. So I'm going to spend a little time on this slide, but I think it's helpful to look at what other states are doing. As mentioned at the start, the U.S. Climate Alliance states, an alliance of now 24 states that are working to forward the goals of the Paris Agreement, are leaders in working to incorporate natural and working lands into climate goals and are taking varied approaches for the land sector. This slide shares two states as illustrations. Maine has a statutory GHG goal of a 45% reduction of emissions in 2030 and an 80% reduction by 2050, and created an 8-part economy-wide all-sector climate action strategy. The 5th part of that strategy is protect Maine's environment and working lands and waters, promote natural climate solutions, and increase carbon sequestration. The strategy states that natural and working lands are key to Maine achieving its carbon neutrality commitment in 2045. And specifically, protecting natural and working lands from development maintains their potential to draw back carbon from the atmosphere, as well as provide multiple important benefits. They also made a 30 by 30 commitment in 2020 and added the land sector to their overall GHG emissions inventory so that it's all calculated together in the state as a whole. After reviewing state information in 2021, Maine determined that they were at 20.1% of their goal toward 30 by 30, and started reviewing state information to inform specific conservation target selection. In 2025, after further reviewing state information and needs, the target work morphed into creating a landscape conservation blueprint that will help prioritize distinct targets to understand which actions to take and where to take them. Meanwhile, the conservation protection efforts continue under the one large goal, and the state is now at 22.2% after historic investments from the legislature to acquire land. California also has an economic sector goal, and similarly to Maine, national working lands were intended to be used to fill the gap between what California is emitting and reaching net zero or carbon neutrality. While they're working on building up their natural and working lands program, the state committed to 30 by 30 as well, specifically delineating lands and waters. You can see the baseline they established after a review that took 5 years on the slide. They maintain a separate natural and working lands inventory similar to Oregon. And in 2024, as directed by legislation, they published activity targets, calling them nature-based solution climate targets. The targets are intended to increase landscape resilience and thus support nature-based sequestration and storage. They include actions that can be quantified to calculate net carbon benefits, but also actions that cannot be quantified yet, but are known to deliver climate benefits. Lastly, the targets are meant to meet or exceed the set natural working lands carbon goal. California learned through their most recent inventory that their lands are a net source, unlike Oregon, which ours are a net in a net sequestration state. So their goal focuses on the major sources of emissions that they are facing, including wildfire. California's natural working land goal is to ensure a loss of no greater than 4% carbon stocks in California lands compared to 2014 levels by the year 2045, which is intended to prioritize actions that result in a reduction in the impacts of wildfire. And if achieved, they will have made serious progress toward decreasing catastrophic wildfires and greatly increase forest resilience. So while it's a pretty simply stated goal, it is very ambitious. California will be using their inventory, their national working lands inventory, improving understanding of collective climate action in the land sectors, and will use the standard metrics that their national working lands program is creating in order to be able to track progress across agencies for their climate targets. Next slide. And I believe Jason.
Yep, this comes back to me. So having talked about different ways other states have set their goals, we wanted to highlight some relevant information that might help inform the development of goals in Oregon that is similar to what other states have used. So among the information that we have available to us now in Oregon with the land-based net carbon inventory published at the end of last year, we know that Oregon's lands have been a historical net sink of carbon from 95.6 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 1990, now down to 48.3 million metric tons of carbon dioxide of removals in 2024. However, it is still a net remover. So we can also consider estimated emissions in the sector-based inventory and the consumption-based inventory. And you can see figures there on how much those emissions currently are. And so we also have projections from the TIGR 2.0 analysis on future reductions in sector-based emissions that could interact and work with our climate team at Odo and with experts at DEQ to think about how this might form a natural working lands goal. Looking at the work we have in progress, so Odo is currently working with contractors that are actually speaking in a few moments here on information related to natural climate solutions being deployed in Oregon now, or that could be deployed in the future. They will also be gathering information to estimate carbon benefits and community impacts of these natural climate solutions, including, where possible, the impacts of natural climate solutions on community and ecosystem climate resilience. So depending on the data and information on natural climate solutions the project team is able to gather from agencies and from the scientific literature, Odo may be able to assess potential increases in net sequestration from some natural climate solutions. We emphasize, though, that we do not expect to be able to calculate carbon benefits from all of natural climate solutions the project team is working on due to issues like data availability and lack of guidance from scientific literature. Finally, there is other ongoing research and analysis in the state, such as the Oregon Department of Forestry's work with the American Forests on projections of carbon sequestration and storage potential. So some or all of this information may be used for goal setting, and we'll be providing more information and input at several points leading up to the next round of recommended goals. Next slide, and I think it's back to Liz.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, before we move on to the NCS and metrics project, this is just a summary slide, in part does not even list all the things we just talked about, to relay that we're in the midst of gathering the information, the efforts, the goals, the reports that we should consider and that we are aware of. We're looking forward to the work that will occur between the agencies relative to the Resilience EO, most of which will dovetail with Natural Climate Solutions action, since they are a subset of nature-based solutions and contain a net carbon benefit. Next slide. Before we pause for questions, this slide shares what the Commission can expect this year relative to goal setting per meeting. In March, we'll share the frameworks and approaches in a clear, process-oriented way we're thinking about which approach to select in order to come up with a goal that you all can discuss. In April, we'll be on hand to present, but there will also be an opportunity for the NCS committee that the chair convenes with some of you to provide a readout of the February and March committee meetings that will occur and are scheduled. And we expect to be able to submit the staff report and recommendation to the Commission after engagement with the interagency working group and the advisory committee as we're doing throughout the spring in May. And with that, next slide. That is what we have on goal setting today. Chair, would you like to open the discussion and or facilitate questions?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Great presentation. Are there clarifying questions from commissioners? And then, if any have reflections on additional information or perspective that you hope to have to be able to make decisions in June. What would those be? Representative Gamba.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious to go back to your statement that we are, and I always forget what the term is, but net, we are down drawing GHG because the last time I dug into this deeply, which honestly was probably 6 or 7 years ago, we were a net emitter in our natural and working lands, and it was substantive. So I'm interested to know what database you are basing that assertion on.
Thank you, Representative Gamba, for that question. We just completed a 6-month-long methodology and then using that methodology to produce an Oregon-specific land-based net carbon inventory. And so all the details are in that report, and happy to get together with you and kind of talk over details. We have presented to the Commission before, but you may not have been able to make that meeting. And so happy to dig in with you offline.
I would appreciate that. Great. And if you could send my office that report, that would also be wonderful. Thank you.
We'll do that. Thank you. You are muted, Chair. I cannot hear you. Oh, there you are.
So thank you. Good question. And the inventory does kind of speak to that. But it would be great to hear how you, what you looked at 6 or 7 years ago that led you to believe that we were a net emitter on natural and working lands. Other clarifying questions? Or thoughts about what else might be helpful to inform the Commission's decision? Seeing none. Great, let's go on to the next step.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, on to our project work. I am pleased to introduce our project team and have them share some of their initial work. As a reminder, the purpose of the NCS and metrics analysis is to formalize a suite of state-supported NCS and associated metrics, specifically to identify activity-based metrics and community impact metrics, of which the statute provides us some direction, shown on the slide, and ultimately moving toward understanding of the feasibility to track these actions in order to not only calculate their climate mitigation contribution, but to track the impact these actions have on the community in a positive or negative way, as well as tracking progress that the state takes on these actions. Next slide. We have run through the tasks from the scope before, probably quite a bit ago now, but I want to spend some time on a few bottom lines that we've asked this team to do that is worth emphasizing. The statute asks us to leverage existing programs to do the NCS work as much as possible. So this team is charged with conducting a comprehensive assessment of the programs that exist, and the natural climate solutions and related sub-activities that are already being implemented by those programs or could be implemented. We were just able to meet with our partner agencies for work on this on Tuesday, and we're scheduling individual meetings with each agency to dig into the details for this first step, which will let us know where we stand metric-wise for the rest of the work. When the team shares their initial results from their initial compilation, please know that it is a work in progress, and we are just beginning to talk with the agencies who know their programs best. Second, the statute requires a lot of engagement, so thank you for your continued engagement and hearing us when we come to the commission meetings, providing your feedback, and we continue to convene the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee to gather feedback and knowledge from members as well. And lastly, this work is aiming to develop key metrics, ideally metrics that can be the same across several NCS activities across multiple programs, so that it is possible not only to track the work, but to build a metrics infrastructure that helps scale the work to the landscape level, so they are all measuring the same thing. And we know if we're making progress. The team will spend some time talking about what activity-based metrics are and what kind of community metrics they're looking at, or what kind of community metrics they have found that the programs and agency programs are looking at, which includes economic, ecological, and public health categories. I wanted to remind folks that the statute uses the phrase community impact metrics and asks us to create metrics not only for the carbon contribution of NCS activities, but both the positive and negative impacts of NCS implementation to landowners, land managers, and communities. And we are aiming to do that. Next slide. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but we are moving at a fast clip, and the draft final report will be to us in May for public comment, and then June we'll see the final report after engagement, feedback, and public comment. Pleased to introduce Chris Wade from RTI International to take us through the rest of the presentation. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. So as Liz mentioned, I'm going to walk through the Natural Climate Solutions metrics work, and we can jump to the next slide. So this work is being led by a multidisciplinary team here at RTI International, and our team brings together expertise across agriculture, forestry, wetlands, economics, and climate change. And this breadth is important because natural climate solutions sit at the intersection of land management, climate and greenhouse gas accounting, and community outcomes. And today I want to focus on the framework, so how metrics are defined, how agencies are currently tracking outcomes from NCS adoption, and how this work can further support future goal setting. We jump to the next slide. And so really quickly, kind of what we do and our background here at RTI. So our team, and specifically our team, works at connecting land-based actions on and to climate outcomes that are usable for policy and goal setting. At the national level, RTI has actually supported the US's nationally determined contribution I know Liz mentioned that there's not a specific natural working lands goal that's outlined under the NDC, but there are projections within the NDC of how much contribution our national lands or lands across the nation could contribute. And our team helped lead that work up in partnership with US EPA. And so that work, along with other projects that we've done, involve translating these land-based activities into consistent estimates of mitigation potential, accounting for things like baselines, uncertainty, and various adoption levels. And these are the same analytical challenges that states face when setting and tracking climate goals. And so we're bringing these policy-facing methods and lessons learned directly into this Oregon Natural Climate Solutions metrics work. Next slide. And so in addition to working with different policy agencies, we also contribute directly to the scientific literature in focusing on work that strengthens how natural climate solutions are measured and evaluated for climate action. And so this work historically has spanned a wide range of mitigation pathways, from very clear kind of NCS metrics or adoption, such as mitigation from forest management or afforestation, more towards more kind of socially driven pathways. So things such as changes in dietary preferences and how that might influence emissions through agricultural production or land use systems. And so across both biophysical and social pathways, the core challenge really is translating actions into consistent, defensible emissions estimates. And that scientific foundation underpins the framework that we're presenting today. Next slide, please. And so there's a number of NCS activities that we're looking at specifically. These here are what we're looking at within this current work. And the intent is to be transparent about the scope. So these are activities where we can link implementation to outcomes using available methods and data. And this can be thought of kind of as the activity menu that agencies and programs may support. And it becomes for the foundation that follows us as we continue. So for each of these activities, we're looking both at kind of greenhouse gas impacts, community impacts, and ecological impacts through the adoption of these activities. Next slide, please. And so I want to give a quick kind of concrete example of how this work comes together and helps to provide information for the goal setting activities that are yet to come. And so here in this example, we're looking specifically at avoided deforestation. So think about actions that slow the conversion of forest land into non-forest use. Based on the literature, it's estimated that the carbon sequestration rates associated with avoided deforestation in Oregon ranges from a little less than half a ton of CO2 per acre per year up to over 12 metric tons of CO2 per acre per year. And this reflects the difference in forest type, soil types, climates, et cetera, as well as some uncertainty there on these estimates of CO2 sequestration. Then the next step, moving from the carbon benefit, is then thinking about the activity and its applicability. So we found that historically, over a 30-year time horizon, that there's roughly about 20,000 acres per year, and this has an uncertainty range. So with plus or minus about 7,000 acres of forest conversion occurs over time. And so that's what we're thinking of as kind of the potential application. These are the acres that could be avoided from deforestation activities. And so combining these two, we can come up with the total carbon contribution. So thinking about the uncertainty from each range, multiplying those through, we can present or start thinking about avoided deforestation, having this range of about 126,000 tons of CO2 per year up to, over 3.5 million tons of CO2 per year. And so the key point here is not to come up with exact numbers, but it's really the structure, right? This approach allows agencies to translate realistic implementation levels into a range of plausible mitigation outcomes. Uncertainty here is made explicit in these ranges, and that can help inform the natural climate solutions goal setting. And so the same structure applies for the other NCS activities, such as improved forest management or wetland restoration, but the specific metrics being used might differ. Next slide, please. And so a key clarification of this work and a piece that Liz already mentioned was looking at the various carbon metrics or greenhouse gas metrics that are currently being measured by implementation of NCS activities by various state agencies. So this is a list of different carbon outcomes that we've identified that are being tracked by different programs. And you know, these all might sound similar, but there's nuance there that's important. So some programs may track gross sequestration, but really when we're thinking about climate accounting and goal setting, we're really interested in net biological sequestration. So thinking about how these natural climate solutions can have both carbon uptake, but then there also might be losses and relative to a baseline. And so being explicit about this distinction aligns this work with Oregon's greenhouse gas inventory, and it also helps kind of avoid the potential to overstate mitigation benefits. So in addition to identifying carbon outcomes, we've also been looking at community impact metrics. So if we go to the next slide. And these community impact metrics, they reflect changes in human exposure, in risk, and human exposure, risk, and access resulting from NCS implementation. Some examples here that we've identified from existing programs includes heat exposure, stormwater runoff, air quality, flood damages, community vulnerability, and climate resilience. And one thing to note that's missing from this list that you might expect to see is economic productivity, such as changes in crop yields or output of forestry systems. And that absence reflects that current programs, you know, that there's a limit to how much can be tracked. But part of our charge on this work is to identify potential metrics that are important to look at and think about as these activities are being incentivized or encouraged. And so that's something we're working on as we're working with Odo is highlighting maybe these missing pieces. We jump to the next slide. We're also looking into ecological impacts. So thinking more about how the impacts are changing our natural systems. So these could be changes in ecosystem condition, in functions, and integrity resulting from NCS implementation. And these include things like water quality, habitat extent and condition, biodiversity, connectivity, farmland preservation, and invasive species or rangeland conditions. And you'll note on both of these slides, there's a number of these activities that impact both community and ecological systems, but we've tried to take a pass and house each of these into a single area, but we want to acknowledge that, you know, there might be multiple impacts kind of across these different sectors or these different categories. And then if we go to the next slide, so over the past month or so, we've also been looking, or we started our review of initial state programs. So we've been applying this framework, so identifying the various metrics and the various measures that are being identified by programs. To date, we've looked at 32 programs across all natural and working land sectors. This includes kind of 8 interagency working group agencies, as well as 6 non-IWG partner agencies. We've identified 7 different carbon impact metrics that are already being tracked, as well as 14 community impact metrics, which are being tracked. We've cataloged 34 distinct data sources or data sets that are used for tracking and monitoring outcomes. And even with that breadth, there's an opportunity to improve consistency, particularly around the carbon accounting, which is exactly where this framework kind of adds value as we're moving forward. Then we can jump to the next slide. So that's kind of a quick update on where we are. We have a lot in front of us over the next couple months to reach those milestones that Liz mentioned. We're continuing to work with agencies to understand their methods currently used to estimate the greenhouse gas and community impacts. As Liz mentioned, we're setting up one-on-one meetings with these teams to make sure that we have, you know, the most up-to-date information from the folks that are actively working on these projects. We're going to also expand our search of the metrics, or we're actively doing that. We're looking across, you know, outside of state programs and how they're doing it, but also looking at the wider scientific literature. So we can bring kind of a full full list of metrics that should be considered. We're using those, both the in-state metrics and the wider scientific estimates, to come up with mitigation potential estimates for each of the NCS activities. And that will help inform the goal setting kind of moving forward. And with this, we're going to continue to have workshops with the inventory team to make sure that we're aligning our methods and our approach with the work that they've done. And continue to work with different groups within the state and partners within the state to make sure that what we're doing aligns with the many ongoing efforts that Oregon's pursuing. Next slide. Yeah.
I think we're there.
Perfect. Oh, nice.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you for wrapping up our wrap-up slides so nicely. Chair, would you like to facilitate this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that occurred to me, which might be interesting or might be not a great road to go down, but I was thinking about some of the financial reports that grantees provide to the agencies on how they spent funds. And I wonder if there are opportunities to get at jobs and, state-based economic benefits, direct benefits, maybe by looking at those economic financial reports, which hadn't occurred to me before I kind of listened to your talk. So just a thought, we don't need to discuss that. One of the other questions I had before I open it up was just, you all have been involved in a number of really important documents in the US and elsewhere. And I'd just love to hear any reflections you have about kind of lessons learned that we might benefit from as we pursue both the concept of setting goals and establishing the metrics. So things that were great opportunities, things that were challenging, just any reflections and advice you have for us would be great.
Chris, sorry, Liz, go ahead. Did you want me to take this one? I'm happy to at least
Project team,
start
please
the
do. Yes.
Response.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate the opportunity to just meet everyone and have this great, have this opportunity. I guess I would say that I've taken it at a higher altitude view that what we observe goal setting is the question of what's important to this, to the team, to the state, to the group in terms of achievement of the goals. So do we want to be ambitious? Do we want to be pragmatic as well? And balancing, thinking about the efforts that are possible, and then whether or not you want to be kind of a leading vision, and if missing the target is an acceptable way of kind of showing that ambition, then that's a decision that the group can make. What we hope to do is provide that kind of factual evidence that gives you a good estimate of what the technical or the biophysical potential may be, and then maybe a slightly more reduced potential based on competition between different NCS activities, and then also kind of some comparative advantages across different sectors as well. So those trade-offs need to be considered as you set those goals. Also on the front. Go
ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
And then there's an emphasis on the metric setting for this analysis, and I wanted to just point out that I think our goal and lessons learned from past performances, it's difficult to measure if you don't have an apples to apples comparison. And so having some standardization across these metrics that we're kind of either recommending or devising, and making sure that they can be tracked and are comparable across multiple activities would be advantageous and simplify the process of demonstrating progress against goals. I'll stop there.
Thank you. That two great pieces of advice. I'll open it to other questions for either the staff team or our consultants. Maybe I don't see any. Liz, do you see any?
I do not see any. Jason
Maybe
is interacting with the chat, so.
Okay. I don't have the chat up, so.
Okay.
Maybe one last question. I know there's more or less scientific information about different activities. And are there any lessons learned about how different jurisdictions have handled that?
That is also for the project team.
Yes.
From your expertise base. Yeah.
Yes, apologies. And also, fair enough if you want to defer that and come back to us with with thoughts on that later.
I would let the rest of the team speak. I think you all can come off mute if you are, but I think I'll defer answer to that one at this time myself. I think that's what we're kind of working to explore with the next month or so's one-on-one interviews with different agency groups and other key information holders in the state over the next month or two. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I'll add a little. I think pieces we've seen or examples we've seen actually from Maine, which Liz, I'm glad you gave that example. You know, they're very clear on emission reduction targets for sectors such as energy, where it's a clear emissions and, you know, there's technology that can be implemented and kind of reduce emissions. But their land sector goals are less rigid and have a little more flexibility, recognizing some of the uncertainty. And so I think it's just important to acknowledge and already the fact that you're asking about it and thinking about it, I think is a great spot because we can't put all our eggs in the land sector basket, even if it is, you know, one of the bright spots for carbon reduction or carbon sequestration. So I think building in flexibility in land sector goals is important because there is uncertainty. There's uncertainty around permanence. You know, uptake might change over time and things. So the awareness is key, and I think kind of building that into the goals is important.
Last words, Liz or Jason?
No, I think that was kind of a wonderful place to end today.
Great.
Thank you, project team.
Yeah, thank you. And staff, great presentation. We'll take a break. We'll come back at 10:56. When you come back, please go on video so we can kind of take stock of the fact that folks are back. We will go into public comment and then immediately go into a discussion and vote of a request from ODFW and OWEB for use of some of the natural and working lands funds. So if you have not identified that you want to testify today, please do so now and indicate the topic. We will be prioritizing the topic associated with the vote. And trying to make sure we hear those before we take the vote. So thank you. See you back in 4 minutes. Okay, I'd like to reconvene the commission meeting after our break and move towards public comment. I believe we have at least two who have identified interest in providing public comment. And look to Jen and Jeff to identify if others have identified themselves as being interested in providing public comment and in particular on the vote that we're about to take. I just kind of checking, looks like we may not have all of the commissioners back on yet, but I think it would make sense for us to go ahead and take public comment, as I imagine folks are listening and will be on camera shortly. So with that, Jen or Jeff, will you tee up the first person who wants to provide public comment?
We have Lauren Link, who signed up for public comment. She's now able to unmute herself.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, welcome. Hello, Chair McDonald and members of the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today on the Natural Working Lands Fund allocation request. For the record, my name is Lauren Link, and I'm State Policy Advisor for the Nature Conservancy here in Oregon. Today, I'm excited to speak on behalf of the Natural Climate Solutions Coalition. We're a diverse group of climate, conservation, and working lands-focused organizations committed to increasing the pace and scale of natural climate solutions in Oregon. Our coalition has a strong history of advocating for investments in our natural working lands, and we're instrumental in the creation of the Natural Working Land Fund back in 2023. Many of our coalition members work directly with farmers, ranchers, and forest owners to implement NCS practices and have seen firsthand the economic, social, climate, and health benefits these practices provide for Oregonians. We were really excited to see the governor's Executive Order 2526 recognize the power and promise of our natural working lands, and the coalition supports the development of one set of climate resilience attributes that will be used by all natural resource agencies. We applaud the great work that Odo and the NCS team have already completed that we just heard about, particularly the first land-based net carbon inventory and natural working lands workforce needs study, and encourage the interagency team to continue to work closely with Odo as they define their NCS activity and impact metrics to ensure a really strong and robust approach and consistency across those efforts. As the interagency team considers who to invite to the table on development of these attributes, the coalition strongly recommends that experts in NCS practices, as well as practitioners doing on-the-ground work, are part of this important conversation. We would also advocate that the Climate Action Commission maintain a strong role in this discussion, as they've been at the forefront of advancing NCS policy in Oregon. And then as the interagency team continues to build out their process, we encourage the team, as they're able, to communicate early on the attribute assessment timeline so we can better understand how these attributes will be used to inform the subsequent actions outlined in the executive order, and when and how partners and the public can engage and provide input. So in closing, we just want to thank the agencies and the commission for continuing to do this important work, and to please keep the coalition and its members in mind as a resource. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Lauren, and appreciate all the advocacy the coalition has had for natural climate solutions. We'll hold questions and just maybe go to the next presenter. Jen or Jeff?
Yes, we should have Bobby or Robert Hayden.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McDonald and commission members, for the opportunity to comment today in very much support of ODFW and OWEB's funding proposal before you today. For the record, my name is Bobby Hayden, and I'm an officer with the Pew Charitable Trusts, and I'm based out of our Portland office. Pew's U.S. conservation team works on a variety of related issues: lands and waters protection, climate-ready management of species and habitats, restoring terrestrial and aquatic connectivity, preparing communities for climate impacts, and a focus on greenhouse gas sinks like coastal wetlands and peatlands. On that last topic of greenhouse gas sinks, in 2020 and 2021, Pew was really honored to fund and connect scientists to co-develop Oregon's first GHG inventory for coastal blue carbon ecosystems, which, as you may know, helped inform the Commission's broader natural and working lands proposal and the inventory that followed. Based on our current work in Oregon, Pew does support ODFW and OEB's funding request to support implementation of EO 2526 from Governor Kotek from October. As you heard from Chandra Ferrari earlier, a critical part of this EO is developing natural resource resilience attributes. Defining resilient lands and waters is a complex task and will require investment proposed by the two agencies today. Also, their plan, as we understand it, to involve knowledge holders with expertise in a range of issues will contribute to the ultimate success of the effort. As many of you know, in 2023 with HB 3409, that legislation did include broad definitions of both climate resilience and natural climate solutions that both help underscore the relationship between mitigation and adaptation, given so many innovative practices on lands and waters do help with both efforts. So accordingly, the resilience attributes proposal before you we see as a real supplement to the ongoing NCS work of OCAC and OCAC and ODO. Similar to Lauren Link's comments, we encourage the state to include at least one expert in NCS as that resilience attributes group moves forward, and that the final attributes include characteristics that are directly tied to GHG benefits of lands and waters. That will again ensure that the mitigation and the adaptation conversations going on in Oregon are really woven together in a meaningful way. In conclusion, again, Pew supports this funding request before you today, as we do think it will advance all these multi-sector resilience efforts to benefit all Oregonians. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your comments and perspective about how the two efforts connect together. Jen, do we have anyone else who identified that they wanted to speak to the funding proposal request?
Not at this time. We only had those two sign up.
Great. Well, with that, we can move to the next slide and our discussion and the presentation and vote on the request that is before us. So just as a quick reminder, the Natural and Working Lands Fund was established as part of House Bill 3409 in 2023. And in early 2024, the Commission made a number of commitments to the fund agencies, and there are 4 fund agencies to invest in projects. We allocated most of the $10 million that was allocated by the legislature in 2023, but kept a little bit in reserve for us to make decisions on follow-on actions. We've gotten a request from OEB and ODFW, who are the lead agencies, as you heard earlier from Chandra, on Executive Order 25-26. And they are requesting $55,000, not to exceed $55,000 in funding from the Natural and Working Lands Fund to support the development of climate resilience attributes. And as we have, I think, discussed in the past, natural climate solutions, the definition in statute includes resilience as an important component of how we think about what are natural climate solutions. So with that, I'll turn things over to Executive Director O'Brien to kind of provide a little additional information, and then we'll go to questions and discussions and a vote.
Thanks, Chair McDonald and Commission members. Sarah O'Brien, for the record, Executive Director of OEB, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and I know Sarah Reif is also here today from ODFW in case there are questions. about our coordination on this. So I feel like the vast majority of what I thought I would say has been covered by the combination of Chandra's presentation this morning, public comment, and kind of Chair McDonald's intro there. So just for the sake of a little bit more clarity and context, as Chair McDonald said, this is a joint request from ODFW and OWEB to allocate up to $55,000 of remaining funds in that parent fund that was established by HB 3409 in 2023. You all heard from Chandra this morning, I think a great presentation and overview of both Executive Order 2526 and the specific task there that we're kind of just starting to grind into gear on, where the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, OWEB, and ODFW are leading an interagency team to help identify these attributes of climate resiliency for Oregon's lands and waters. And so I think Chandra's overview of that will have helped kind of orient ourselves towards how maybe we need some help with this, because we, and I was going to add as well, and I think a couple of folks have mentioned too, you know, the executive order specifically directed us to work closely with ODO and the Natural and Working Lands Program, and just recognizes the clear connection between the two bodies of work, as several folks have commented on today. And I do want to reassure folks, our staff have been poring over this already and working together really closely between our two agencies, between our three agencies, with a broader set of natural resource agencies to kind of start the research and lay the foundation. So if the goal is for us to develop these attributes that are our kind of our true north, and in some sense the way that the state natural resource agencies integrate, strategize, row in the same direction, and kind of show our work in terms of our contributions towards you know, helping to build Oregon's land water resources to be as resilient as possible in the face of climate change. Chandra mentioned a deadline that I hope caught people's ears, because it gives me little heart palpitations every time I hear it, that, well, we'll just have these attributes together by spring. And, you know, Chandra might say early spring and I might say late spring. But for agencies to be able to use these attributes as part of our budget development process and really start thinking about how do we, in the face of a pretty constrained budget environment, steer our existing missions and mandates and funds in a more coordinated and strategic way towards this true north. We're going to have to move quickly, and we know that there are a lot of folks, as our commenters mentioned, that have so much expertise, experience, connection, context, wisdom, knowledge that we need to bring into this conversation. So we're really seeing that sort of draft attributes product that we're aiming for this spring to be kind of baked enough that we can start using that to support bringing our budgets and our POPs together and towards that North Star, but also just recognizing that that's going to be an iterative product. And as soon as we start defining baseline and trying to implement this stuff, we'll find a lot of places where we need to improve. But we also need to do this sort of, can't remember who used to say this, but it was somebody at the Governor's Natural Resource Office in a previous administration that would call it the fun end of the funnel, where we need to get a ton of ideas from a lot of people really quickly. Then we need to have this sort of content expert interagency table, and we need to have robust engagement with tribes and a government to government relationship. And then we need to have enough of a draft product that we can kind of do some light version of maybe a public review and comment, so that we can have all the interest groups that might be affected by or interested in this, sort of and external partners, a chance to weigh in. So to condense that in that kind of time frame and really do it justice, we will ask for some grace, and we will ask for some understanding that this will be an iterative and a living product. And we really need to be able to ask for some help from Oregon Consensus, where we have experts in community engagement and process, and sort of building these sort of research and synthesis products and in the public eye in a way that gives a robust opportunity for engagement, and also holds us accountable as we move forward into implementation. So we're not just sort of coming up with a pie in the sky idea. We're making sure that we really understand how this connects to, you know, our agency's day-to-day missions and the way we interact with partners and the way we serve Oregonians. So that is kind of an overview of the rationale behind the request. We're looking for support from the experts at Oregon Consensus. They've been kind to start working and talking with us already to start laying the foundation for this effort so that we can move quickly when we hit the ground. So this funding request would really allow Oregon Consensus to do some upfront background research to help us design a process to achieve the kinds of engagement goals that our public commenters talked about, to have the interagency table to process that and get something back up to you all and to the governor's office quickly, and to make sure we are cross-wiring through all of that. So they say they can help us with that a lot for an amount not to exceed $55,000, and I've worked with them enough to take them at their word. They're kind of geniuses over there. So we see this work, and I really appreciate the public comment setup is really consistent with one of the ODFW's eligible uses for this fund, to conduct research to understand, and then the contributions of Natural Climate Solutions, which, as the commenters mentioned, really includes strengthening climate resilience as a key factor. If folks have any questions about the mechanics of this, I do have with me as well today OWEB's Deputy Director, Stephanie Page, who's been working closely with the ODO folks and the ODFW folks to figure out how this whole thing would actually work. But that's I think the quick overview of what we're hoping to do here. And it is funny when you say something scary out loud, it just becomes a lot scarier. But we are really excited about it, and it's a cool opportunity to figure out how all this cross-wiring works and to have some support in that. So we really appreciate the commission considering the proposal.
Thank you, Executive Director O'Brien. Any critical questions before the vote? Certainly there may be other questions that folks would like to ask, but critical questions before we vote. Commissioner Sievers.
Hey, good morning. Is my microphone working?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chair McDonald. I guess my question revolves around the budget remaining for 2026. And if it looks like it was from unallocated funds. So I guess the question is the current projects, if there's any potential for them to be over budget to compete with these funds. And then the second part of the question is, I think late last year we had some presentations from the National Working Lands projects, and it looked like there were some future projects that were unfunded currently. And so how you would weigh some of those unfunded identified projects versus this proposal.
Maybe just to clarify before I open it up to Sarah and Stephanie, I think you said 26, which I immediately went to Executive Order 2526-26, but I think you meant from our, I think you meant from our original allocations, some of those projects.
Right. Yeah, the budget for 2026
and the budget of
was
remaining
288,000. Yeah.
Am I still unmuted? Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'm going to ask Stephanie to come on screen here if you're able and help. I know that there is both a parent fund and then payments that went out to individual agencies to fund those programs. And so I'm aware that there's just a little more than 200,000 of the original 10 million left in that parent fund because everything else has been allocated back out into the individual agency funds for the projects that you described. I think I'm not as familiar with the unfunded projects that you described. So either Stephanie can help, or she may be able to help point us to somebody else who can help clarify that.
Good morning, Chair McDonald and Commissioners. Stephanie Page for the record with OWEB. I think I would need to do a little more homework to refresh my memory on the unfunded projects. So I'm happy to do that and follow up with you offline. But and I'm happy to walk through more of the details of the fund. Executive Director O'Brien is correct. There's about 200,000 that is remaining in the fund for the commission to allocate.
And maybe I'll just speak a little bit to your question. We started down a process hoping that the legislature in 2025 would allocate additional funds, and we started a process to identify new projects that we could invest in, as well as how we might use the remaining funds that we have. We put all of that on hold when we realized when we didn't get additional funding and just the rush of other business. So really, this is kind of a new look at how to use those funds. And I think the right perspective for our vote today is we're asking for 55, up to 55,000 of the 200,000 that's remaining. And, you know, ideally we would have this in context of other ideas, but, you know, given the importance of advancing, at least in my perspective, of advancing the executive order and the tight connections with the work that we have, I think making a decision without all, you know, a much broader context, which would take time to develop, you know, feels right to me, but appreciate that others might have different perspective. Any other questions? And thank you. That was an important question to get on the table for our decision making. Any other questions? Okay, without seeing any, I'm going to go through a roll call. And if for some reason I miss you, please let me know. It's a little, there are a lot of people on our call today, some of which are commissioners and some which aren't, which I appreciate. So, but just help me out if I happen to miss you as I go down the roll call. So Commissioner McNichol.
Was there actually a motion on the table?
Oh,
I'm sure you'll need to advance to the next slide, please.
Apologies.
Sorry.
I got ahead of myself.
Sorry,
So,
that's the lawyer in me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was the intention. So this is the motion that we will be voting on. And with that, I'd like to ask someone to propose that we vote on the motion.
So moved.
Excellent.
Dan Thorndike.
And a second? Thank you, Dan.
I'll second it. This
Excellent.
is Commissioner McNichol.
I can anticipate your vote. So with that, we'll go through the roll call. And thank you, Commissioner Thorndike. Commissioner McNichol.
I support the motion.
Excellent. And Thorndike.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Sheeran.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. I've been having trouble with both mic and camera this morning.
Commissioner Sievers.
Yes.
Or Apter.
Yes.
Commissioner Reitman.
Yes.
Commissioner Arifin.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, apologies. I'm looking
okay.
at my list to see who I might have missed.
Yeah.
Okay, I got everyone.
Commissioner Lemon?
Anybody non-voting? Okay.
Sure, Commissioner Lem.
Oh, you know,
Be-
I apologies. Yes, Commissioner Lem. Thank you.
Thank you. I vote yes as well. Thank you.
Excellent. This is me getting used to our new system. I don't think there are any other voting members. Thank you. And I also vote yes, and really look forward to the work and the collaboration with the lead agencies for the executive order and the ability to make sure that the natural climate solutions work and metrics work and goal setting and this work really tie well together. So thank you. The request is approved and allocated, and we look forward to hearing from all of you about the good work that's happening.
Thanks
So
so
with
much,
that-
commissioners. We'll be connecting with staff and we'll come back here and show our work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Excellent. So we'll go to our last agenda item, and this is something that we talked about earlier in the meeting, the importance of transmission, and it's a topic that we've touched on many times over the last several years, and in particular, the importance of transmission to making sure that or contributing to our ability to attain the ambitious goals in House Bill 2021. And so we have three speakers today who are going to give us kind of an update and a perspective on some of the challenges and opportunities for advancing transmission. We will be hearing from our own Commissioner Apter, this time in her role as Oregon Director of Climate Solutions, and Diane Brandt, who is the Policy and Legislative Affairs Director for Renewable Northwest, as well as J.D. Podolinsky, excuse me, who is the Senior Transmission Delivery Director for PGE. So I really appreciate you all joining us today, and appreciate what we're about to hear about. We'll have time for discussion after the panel presentation and a number of questions. So thank you. So with that, I will turn it over. I think we only have slides for JD's presentation, so we might take the slides down so we can see each other a little better while others are presenting. Does that sound right to the presenters?
Yes, I think that makes sense, Chair McDonald. Thank you. All right, I believe I'm kicking us off. And are we a little bit behind in the agenda, Kathy, or are we doing okay?
Just about 3 minutes.
Oh, okay,
So not too
great.
bad.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the chance to kind of switch hats and join this conversation wearing from the perspective of my day job, which again is as Oregon Director with Climate Solutions, and really just appreciate that this is a continued focus and topic of conversation for the Commission. When we were planning this panel, we agreed it would be nice to keep things a bit more conversational and high level. We have had a number of deeper dives and updates and conversations on transmission over the past year plus, and figured it would be nice to take a step back and have less text, fewer slides, and put a human face on transmission, if you will. I will say I've worked in public policy for nearly 15 years at this point, across every level of government and many different issues, and transmission is probably the most wonky topic I've worked on in the policy space. It's full of acronyms, agencies, obscure processes, and so given that complexity, I feel brave going slideless, but I'm going to do my best to give us a verbal refresher, plenty of hand gestures on, again, why transmission matters, why we should care, and why this should be a continued focus of the Commission and the state. So just starting with the very basic refresher of what we're actually talking about. Again, transmission is the very large, high voltage power lines that move electricity over long distances from where it's generated to where it's needed. And this is, again, where hand gestures are limited, but hopefully folks have the picture of the big infrastructure we're talking about, not the distribution lines in our neighborhoods, but the major lines that move, stretching across rural landscapes, highways, the kind you notice because they're so big and unavoidable. So again, at its core, transmission is what moves energy from one place to another when and where it's needed. And that's what makes it so important. We could build thousands of megawatts of new wind and solar tomorrow, But if we don't have the transmission to connect those resources to the grid and deliver power to homes and businesses, that energy is essentially stranded. So it doesn't help lower our energy bills, it doesn't power our economy, and it doesn't move us toward achieving our clean energy goals and reducing emissions if we don't have the infrastructure to connect it. So as a climate policy advocate, I care deeply about solving for transmission because I recognize it's essential to decarbonization and one of the biggest obstacles that's really standing between us and our clean energy goals. And I will say I also have begun to care deeply about transmission just as an Oregonian because I care about our local economies, I care about jobs and resilient communities, and all of that depends on a power grid that can meet the demands of our growing economy and the changing climate that we're all experiencing day by day. So I will say I have been very heartened in recent years about just the number of people who, the growing number of people who understand why this is an issue that we need to urgently address. And I want to share a few examples just about the various collaborations that are underway in the state. One of which Climate Solutions and Renewable Northwest have been a part of, and for the past 3 years, the Oregon Clean Grid Collaborative. This is a group of environmental justice, labor, ratepayer, conservation, tribal organizations that came together to really focus on 2 major barriers, the lack of a regional electricity market and lack of transmission. As I said, these are very complex issues, and so having a diverse set of stakeholders really digging into, what are the challenges, what are the barriers, how can we work together to address them, is extremely important during this pivotal time. I would say Governor Kotek's Clean Tech Task Force, business and labor leadership and interest in solving for energy capacity is another bright spot. There are many more examples I could share, but I would just say a recent anecdote that really crystallized for me that transmission is becoming a hot issue is in legislator conversations. This past legislative days, I had multiple legislators ask me, what are we doing on transmission? What's coming next? And that is a huge step from where we were a few years ago, where folks' eyes would glaze over, halfway through the word. So that's very positive to me in terms of how are we as a state going to address the key barriers that we need to overcome. I want to center on transmission capacity and the need to rapidly expand our infrastructure. Within that bucket, we have challenges around aging infrastructure, decades old. I think this commission is very well aware of the unprecedented load growth we're experiencing, lots of attention around expansion of energy intensive data centers and what does that mean for strain on the grid. We have talked about, and I think we'll get into more, siting and permitting delays that can stretch out projects over long periods of time. BPA interconnection, and then, limited coordination across the many different entities involved in transmission planning and investment. Those are just some of the challenges, and I think really underscore there, no single actor controls over this, and that's part of what makes transmission so hard. And it's important to focus on what we can control at the state level. We can make progress on siting and permitting processes for transmission. We can enhance coordination across, utilities, agencies, regional actors, and we can identify and advance innovative approaches to finance transmission. We also, I think one piece of progress I do want to call out is this past legislative session, Rep. Gamba's bill, the Grid Enhancing Technologies Bill. This is a great example of what effective state leadership on transmission looks like. This will help maximize efficiency on the existing grid, so making the most of our existing infrastructure to unlock near-term capacity, at lower costs with real benefits. So we have the tools, and I think the executive order that Amy Slusher in the governor's office reviewed, EO 2529, is a really critical launching point for the work to come. We'll just close by saying that executive order is asking agencies to use their existing authority and budgets to advance progress on transmission. And I will say, the deadlines and timelines in that executive order give me hope that what comes out of the agency implementation can really lay the groundwork for legislative progress and action in 2027. So I will close there. I'm really excited to hear from my co-panelists and to get into the Q&A discussion. Thanks again.
Diane Brandt is next.
Thank you. And also thank you for giving the opportunity to come and talk on a panel where there are no slides required. So that it's much appreciated, and I look forward to the conversation. Just to add on to what Nora was saying and pulling back to the regional perspective of it all, Renewable Northwest, we do engage regionally. We engage in all 4 of the Northwest states on decarbonizing, getting more clean energy and storage onto the grid as quickly as possible to support our decarbonization goals. But I think we have a unique perspective in that we do engage in the regional forums. We engage at BPA. We get involved in conversations like the West Tech, which I'll mention again in a little bit. We have participated in the markets formations. We get involved regionally. And that gives a unique perspective and a reminder of how important it is that we work on it even at a state level. As we are moving towards a decarbonized grid and using more of solar and wind resources and storage, it's even more important that we have a functioning interconnected grid around the region in order to access all of these different and diverse resources in order to maintain reliability. We have our cold snaps in the winter. We're able to access power from other regions, say solar in the Southwest. And also in the summer, it just gives us more diversity to meet the demands that we have on our system in those stress times. I will say some of the difficulties and challenges that aren't necessarily unovercomable, but if that's a word, but we should be aware of is the unique structure, and I think perhaps you've discussed it before, of the power sector in our region. We don't have the RTO, the Regional Transmission Organization. We don't have the ISOs like they do in California, ERCOT in Texas, MISO in the Mid-Continent. You hear a lot of these names thrown around. The benefits of that are the comprehensive planning piece that I think we're struggling with here in the Northwest, because we have IOUs, PGE, Pacificor, Avista, everyone doing their own great planning for their system and to serve their customers. But there is no one entity to look at the statewide or the regional perspective. We do have probably the closest thing is BPA for that transmission system, which touches all of the other transmission systems. And I think PGE will touch on it a little bit. But BPA is also looking at their customers, whether it's transmission customers or their power customers. So there's no entity saying what is best for the region, what is best for the state. And I think that is an area we should all be aware of and should make sure that we're thinking broader than those siloed planning pieces. I think some of the solutions that are emerging, I mentioned West Tech. And I will try and remember what it stands for, but I can also drop the link in the chat. But this is the Western Transmission Expansion Coalition, I believe. And all of the utilities in the West and BPA and all of the other federal power marketing agencies got together and put together what projects do we need to do in the next 10 years and 20 years in order to maintain reliability. So that first 10-year plan will come out next week, and they're doing a public webinar on it. And I think this will be a great moment to start thinking more regionally about our transmission system, because it will identify some of these the key projects that we need to think about to get online to maintain reliability. I will say that West Tech reminds me we need more collaborative platforms to get these things built and for planning. And I think there's a growing recognition of that, in addition to what Nora is saying about the growing recognition of how important transmission is and how critical it is to get things online. I will say we do have renewable energy developer members in our membership, and we talk a lot about the barriers for them getting their projects online. Just as Nora said, even if they build the wind farm, if there's a delay in their interconnection agreement, or they have a couple more $1 million, maybe actually hundreds of millions of dollars of added fees in order to upgrade the transmission system in order to interconnect, that causes delays, and of course is something that we all need to grapple with. I'll just say one more potential solution that builds on what Nora mentioned about the GETS bill, the Grid Enhancing Technologies bill, is there's a lot to be gained in looking at our existing infrastructure. And I mean that in terms of the existing lines, the existing rights of ways, and what can we do within those. It might mean some minor or small expansions of those existing right of ways to accommodate larger infrastructure, as we say, this is a 115 kV line, we need to make it a 500 kV line. It's going to look bigger. It's going to be more. And I don't want to discount the impact that we will be seeing with these builds, but I do want to emphasize the potential for minimizing the impacts of the build out by focusing on these rights of ways and reconductoring what we already have. I think there's a lot to be gained in that. And hopefully we can have more conversations around what that means, because there are implications with permitting and Oregon's land use system. And I'll stop there and just say, look forward to questions. West Tech's coming out. We're going to see some more maps of potential projects moving forward. And there's a lot to be done, but we're starting to get a clear picture of what that looks like.
I think the West Tech report, there's going to be a briefing available next week. Is that right?
That's correct. There will be a public webinar on February 4th, and it looks like Jeff dropped a link in the chat on that. And they will go over what is in that 10-year plan there. And I know that the organizers and also Renewable Northwest, we're working on figuring out where we need to do follow-up presentations to socialize those results, and so we can have conversations about what that looks like.
Jeff, I tried to follow that link just to see if it got to the presentation. It didn't work for me, but you might just check it.
I'm troubleshooting that now. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I just realized that.
All right. Well, with that, then we will turn it over to JD and hear from PGE about some of the opportunities and challenges relative to transmission.
Yeah, thanks, Chair McDonald and Commission members. Good morning. If we can, I've got just a couple of slides I do want to share. I think it ties really well to what Nora and Diane were just talking about. So
absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully we don't have to go through. There we go. Thank you.
All right, next slide. Next slide. All right, so yeah, I feel like this picture's worth 1,000 words, and Nora hit it right on the head. You can see even for PGE's service territory, we've got transmission that goes outside of where we serve our customers, and that's usually your larger kV, so 500 kV to 230 kV. And that's all coming back into our service territory. Our service territory, is throughout the Willamette Valley from Portland down to Salem. And you can see in the quick facts, we go through 51 incorporated cities. That's important to note. We'll bring that up here in a few minutes. But as been mentioned, our transmission system's highly constrained to where we don't have a lot of remaining capacity out there. If anyone that's driving along the I-5 corridor and just look at what Wilsonville looks like now versus what Wilsonville looked like 20 years ago, there's been a lot of growth in the Valley area. We've mentioned as well, where some of our transmission goes out. If you brought the BPA map in, that you would see all kinds of connections. That's even there on the upper right-hand side. You can see where we've got some transmission that then connects into Bonneville Power Administration's system, and they're connected into the hydro resources in Washington and Oregon, and a lot of that flows towards Portland. A lot of that flows up through Seattle. As far as transmission solutions, we need every solution out there right now. So we need to utilize the technologies. We need to utilize where we can reconductoring and within the corridors. And we've also got to build some new transmission to really make that grid resilient. Final note here, and we'll get into it a little bit. Land use and permitting can be really challenging on these transmission projects, and something we'll want to talk about a little more here in a few minutes. Next slide. So, PGE's approach is evolving. 20 years ago, we would have been able to just rely on everything coming through Bonneville Power Administration's system, got very good interconnections to them. We had strong resources, energy that would come in. Now their system is fully subscribed, whether you're trying to connect a new generator or if you're even trying to get transmission requests through there. And so with that, it's a combo of, PGE, we've got to go out and acquire new resources to support our integrated resource plan. And we've got to make sure there's transmission distribution there to get those resources back into our system. Key thing throughout this is where can you optimize within the grid? What type of programs can you do to support flexibility, support demand response when needed on those peak days? Next slide, please. Final thing I wanted to bring up, this is our final slide on this, is just to show, and I think this helps summarize the challenges of transmission, is as we find a great renewable resource out there, that's in one spot, one location typically. You need all three of these circles working in tandem to get that resource to your customers. And so the inner circle there, our last mile to serve customers, we've got to make sure all of those transmission lines have capacity, that they're able to see power flowing, some way, sometimes north to south, sometimes south to north, to bring in those resources. Any upgrades that we want to do and connect to BPA, we've got to make sure PGE's system has been upgraded at the substation level, at the transmission level to interconnect. And then BPA's got to also hit that timing as far as when they plan to have their system ready for that interconnect. And then finally, just like we've mentioned, if there's system issues out there and we need to flow power, from the desert Southwest, from the Northwest, being well connected throughout the Northwest is really important. And we do see that there's different conditions in the summer or winter that really cause the power to change which way it's flowing, how we get that to our customers. One solution I know PGE has really been going all in on here is how do we enhance that community engagement that's out there. And so mentioned, we've got 51 incorporated cities out there. Each one of them has different land use requirements and processes. And so even if you've got like a 1 mile transmission line in an existing corridor, you could have multiple different permits, requirements that you need to meet, to get that capacity, that project upgraded. And so we're really looking at how can we get out into the communities, help educate, help inform, and really importantly, listen to what the community members are asking and saying. And so we're standing up what we're calling regional community advisory councils. And this will be a forum in our different counties where volunteers can come in and really go through the projects, the need that we see out there, seek input, seek feedback, and especially on projects where we haven't, we're just in the planning phase, take that input and all right, is the existing corridor, is that our best place, or are there certain areas where things have changed over the last 50 years? And maybe working around part of that corridor is better for the community, is better for the project. And so we're getting those going. We've also been trying to get out to more community town hall meetings. So let's talk, let's listen, answer questions. If my team, if there's transmission that's proposed coming through, making sure we're there to help continue this conversation, because I think we have seen when we go out, not everyone is in the same place right now that we need transmission or what we need to do. And so if the first time they hear about something is a transmission project coming through and they don't have the background, it can be a real challenge. So I think that community engagement and continuing to work on how we help advance permitting, siting, really important in this topic.
Presenters, and one of our charges as a commission is education. So I appreciated that a number of the presenters talked about the challenges on how wonky this topic is, and also the need for kind of education about the importance. So appreciate that. I thought I'd open things up just to provide our panelists the opportunity to maybe comment on things that other panelists mentioned. If you want to double down or have a different thought about a comment that came up from one of your co-presenters, I'd open that up first, and then we can go to broader questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chair McDonald. I would just double down on, Diane mentioned the West Tech studies, really important, helps identify the congestion, but also helps provide solutions to relieve the congestion and integrate more. And then also want for this audience to be aware of Bonneville Power. They just updated their grid enhancement reinforcement portfolio. So that acronym is GERP. It was Evolving Grid a couple years ago. Now it's GERP. But they just posted updated material as far as the timing of those projects. And many of those projects are within the state. So several of them through Central Oregon, up towards the Columbia River, and then connecting to PGE throughout our service territory.
A lot of connections during this meeting to BPA. So appreciated Amy's perspective that maybe we should invite BPA to come and speak to us in the future. And also to recognize the challenges with the West Tech site. Currently the website, it seems to be down. So, but the briefing is on the 4th, is that right? And presumably they'll get things worked out shortly, and just encourage people and commissioners in particular, but everyone who's interested in this, because it is such an important topic. Any other cross comments that presenters want to make? You,
Oh.
you all, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Diane.
I think we all came off mute at the same time. I was just going to say that I do want to acknowledge how wonky transmission gets and the importance of de-wonkifying it as much as we can. So, Nora mentioned that, the Oregon Clean Grid Collaborative that we've been working on together in order to try and do that with our advocacy partners, but also, forums like this or having conversations with people who are not in the weeds of transmission are really important. So welcome ideas and thoughts from others on who needs to hear and who needs to talk through the less wonky version of why we need more transmission.
Must admit, every now and then I flip my light switch and marvel at it because it's like, wow, how does that all work? Anyway, sorry. So you all provided a lot of ideas of solutions. If you want to make any comments towards kind of like top handful, like top couple that you think might be ripe for either public sector legislative approaches, as I think you mentioned, Nora, what could be teed up for 2027. But just if you want to make any comments about kind of like most important things on your mind. You identified a number that are, I imagine, your most important items, but if there's any comment you want to add, and then we'll open it up to broader questions from the commission.
I'm happy to kick us off, Chair McDonald. I thought about an easy way to try to respond to like what are the top 3 things we need to do. As Diane and JD are well aware, the top 3 things that typically come to mind are like improving permitting, planning, and financing or paying. That's, I think Diane coined maybe the 3 Ps for me at least. And there are many different, solutions and tools to support those 3 barriers that we need to overcome. So to try to get a bit more granular and maybe I didn't chime in with your prompt in terms of what I started thinking about and listening to my co-panelists present, but I will say on just the both regional and local side of things, right? The state does have a very important role in those different forums as well. Even though the state doesn't, control or have authority over BPA because it's federally regulated, there is a role for that engagement, as you called out, Chair McDonald, and as you said, as Amy did. The state can't compel utilities or BPA to create or join a particular regional market, but we can, we're not powerless in those arenas. So I think there is an important continued role for our public utility commissioners, the governor's office, others to engage constructively in those conversations and to leverage, convening, the power of convening to bring energy stakeholders together across, BPA utilities, and really think about how can we push forward this coordinated, forward-looking transmission planning in a constructive way. And then I would just say, building off of what we've already talked about in terms of recent progress, the Grid Enhancing Technologies Bill, the Public Utility Commission is already beginning to advance that legislation. We know that implementation is extremely important, and so making sure that as we do make policy progress, we're following through and ensuring that those solutions are effectively implemented. And last thing I'll say, and then really interested in others, is would emphasize what I called out in terms of the opportunity with EO 2529 to really lay the groundwork for durable transmission project progress. And again, if we are going to address siting and permitting constraints and be able to advance the funding solutions that we need to pay for this infrastructure, the legislature will have a very critical role. This conversation has been ongoing for years. So just very hopeful that the 2027 session will be a major opportunity for progress and advancement. I'll pause there.
Commissioner Sheeran, but I think your hand went down, so we'll come back after we open things for Diana and JD to add any comments on priorities.
JD, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I would say, and in the executive order, I think captures this well, but keeping that focus on the grid resilience and reliability as we think about this, and that's, you know, so it's the grid hardening, using the new technologies is helpful. What additional storage can we have to capture the clean energy and have that ready when we need it on the system, and then continuing to look at you know, on the customer side, flexible solutions are, because from a transmission perspective, those really bad days when we have a really hot peak or a spike in that load, what can we do to help mitigate that, and which keeps the system more reliable, more steady during that time. So I think those are important. Also, from trying to build these projects, we're all in on the existing corridors, but it can be really challenging getting the lines out of service, trying to upgrade the line next to the one out as you go. And so I think that's where some of the land uses or land access comes in, because a lot of the times on those permits, you're only able to do that work in a certain time frame of the year under certain conditions. And so I think that all has to play into as far as what's the right solution, the right time to keep things moving.
Yeah. And I'll just add a +1 on the land use and the permitting side of things. And I think there are probably some tweaks we can do that would make it more, I don't want to say rationalized, but could help with some of the timelines, and also not necessarily going around any of the standards, but doing things that could make things more streamlined. And I think it would be a missed opportunity to be talking about transmission and the challenges that we're seeing in the state and not mention wildfire and utility liability. And it's just a complicated policy conundrum, in addition to how it impacts everyday Oregonians. But I do think it's a big piece of this transmission conversation that we need to address. You know, JD mentioned grid hardening. There are things that can be done, but there's also that Oregon we haven't settled on kind of the package of policies that will help the state move forward in a sustainable way around wildfire and the damages, and ensuring that victims are supported, but also allowing for utilities to still find insurance, and it doesn't drive up the cost to customers astronomically. So just acknowledging that is also a big policy piece and a challenge on the horizon for transmission.
I just want to mention that unfortunately, Director Bateman was not able to join us today to maybe speak to some of the land use issues from her perspective, but definitely want to make sure we're hearing that in future meetings. So with that, I'll go ahead and open things up to commissioners. Commissioner Sheeran.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in and first thank all three of our panelists and, you know, my colleague JD. agree with all of the information that was shared today, and really appreciate Diane's last comment there about sort of the specter of wildfire risk hanging over all of this in terms of the ability of utilities to make investments in transmission infrastructure. And also wanted to just sort of provide a slightly different perspective on some of the siting and permitting issues, because so appreciative of the governor's EOs to help move some siting and permitting challenges at the state level. But recognize that even when we're talking about transmission and not distribution system per se, that last mile, that inner circle that JD has there on his picture, a lot of that siting and permitting is not actually the purview of the state; it's local governments. And so we have this, and increasingly what we are finding at Portland General, and I don't think we are unique amongst utilities in this, is that some of the more difficult permitting and siting challenges are actually coming from local governments. So we may be talking about doing upgrades to, transmission lines that are just a few, a mile or, so like really short, relatively small projects from a capital and sort of time perspective, being delayed years and years in permitting and litigation with local governments who are expressing valid and legitimate, in most cases, sort of concerns about the impact of view sheds or, more natural resources locally, but the broader implications for what it means, not only to be able to build out the system to serve the growing energy demands that Oregon has, but also in many of these cases to maintain the reliability of the grid, not just for those customers locally, but for customers across our service territory. And so it's an area where we're going to have to, I think, strike a better balance between sort of the needs of the grid as the whole and some of the authority that sits at that local level with regards to permitting and siting. So just wanted to make that plug.
An important topic for us to further consider. Other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner McNichol.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. One of the things that I've grown more concerned about is the affordability discussion. And, recent press and other narratives have tied affordability to, in many cases, our decarbonization mandates and, the work that's being done. And that's kind of creating some tension, I believe, on this affordability side. I'm curious. So while this communication with it is really, really important, I'm glad there's outreach because there has to be discussion about it. But the message is also important. And so I'm curious as how much of this grid transmission problem is related to this decarbonization. I know it's connected, but I believe it's a problem even if we didn't want to put a single turbine or solar panel in the state. And so I'm just concerned that we don't make that connection so strong that it creates a public backlash against the work that we're trying to do on decarbonization, because I think there's some real risk there. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts about that. I would be curious about sort of how much of the need for the transmission do we think is driven by these decarbonization mandates, strategies, et cetera, versus sort of obviously the data centers is the big one at the moment, but other demands on the system.
I'm happy to do it. I can do a quick general one, but then I'll kick it to JD, who probably has a very specific utility view on this. I think the assertion that we need more transmission regardless of the type of power that we're putting onto the system is a correct one. It is linked to load growth and just increasing demand outside of those large loads. Increased electrification. I think even Portland General has seen a pretty large increase in the demand coming from their residential customers in the last 3 or 4 years. And that could be due to inclement weather, higher adoption of AC, charging our EVs at home, all of those things. So I think that it doesn't matter what type of electrons we're putting on the system. We need more transmission space. We're just out of capacity there. So that's high level general, my view, and I'll let JD give the real details.
Yeah, no,
Thank you,
no,
Diane.
Diane, I think you're spot on with that, and it gets back to my resiliency part of the transmission that I see a need for right now and so again, we went through my one slide pretty quickly, but overall the Northwest did not build a lot of transmission for the last 20 years, and we were able to utilize what was available with resources there, and that's went fully allocated now, and we've seen different types of growth coming in and different resources. And so right now, for Portland in general, sometimes we can see heavy flows that were pretty normal for hydro system power coming in, and we're used to that. But then all of a sudden, it's a really sunny day in the desert Southwest out there, and you get a complete power flow shift going through some of the lines that we never had before. And so, those lines should be able to handle power going both ways, and getting, if you think about resource perspective, that solar is your least cost generation there. And so we need to have that infrastructure in place to unlock those least cost resources. And I think the message needs to be, more out there about the need for resiliency, reliability, and how we're just so interconnected to the Northwest right now as far as generation, as far as how the power travels and gets to our customers.
So I'm reflecting on the message that in order to meet the clean power objectives, we have to do the grid and we have to do all these things, and it's going to cost a huge amount of money, and it's going to affect affordability. That's the narrative that is emerging. So I'm just very concerned that it's going to be create a pushback on the work we're trying to do in the political arena and other arenas. So enough said.
Thank you, Commissioner McNichol. I just want to note, Director Benner referenced a 2024 biennial energy report piece on kind of what is driving electricity rates. So I encourage people to take a look at that. Representative Gamba.
Chair McDonald, could I
thank you.
just chime in? Oh, sorry, just real quick. I do really appreciate, Chair Gamba, this point, and I think it is incumbent on all of us as commissioners to do our part to lift up the ODO, or the Oregon State Energy Strategy, and the findings, right, in terms of the least cost pathways to support resilience and affordability. In this conversation, we are talking about why this is important to decarbonization, but as I tried to emphasize, there's growing recognition across stakeholders that we just need transmission to power our economy, our communities. And so I do think that messaging is taking shape, and I hope we can all uplift the least cost pathway to support reliability and affordability moving forward, is to move more quickly on transmission. And I do think there's important things to lift up around distributed resources too, right? And making sure that we're maximizing efficiencies both on the grid, but also locally sourced resources to reduce, overbuild and make the most of infrastructure once it's built. So I just really appreciate this comment and wanted to chime in that I think there's a lot we can all do as part of that narrative shift.
Representative Gamba.
Okay. To sort of tail off on this conversation, and then I'll say what I was planning to say before. I think there's it's one of the ways I've found to easily diffuse that argument that these costs for the transmission and things are for our climate goals, is to point out that green bastion of environmental leadership, Texas, has outbilled us has built more wind and solar by a factor of 10 than the states of Oregon and Washington combined over the last several years. And the reason they've done that is the cheapest form of new production. So to the degree that we are facilitating the build out of renewable sources with transmission, we are doing it in order to bring people the cheapest possible electricity. That to me is the ultimate answer to that concern. Back to what I wanted to say initially, this has been a great conversation, and I'm so glad that transmission is really starting to have its moment in the limelight, I guess, if you will, because we have kind of dropped the ball and dropped it probably 20 years ago. I think in this moment, it is particularly helpful, at least within the legislature, to use as specific a language as possible when we're talking about solutions, because busy legislators whose focus is, say, medical care or education or whatever other topic have very tiny amounts of bandwidth. And when we use vague concepts that all of us understand when we're discussing this stuff, it goes right over their heads. It doesn't register. And we need the actual solutions that we're working towards to register with them, because very often these kinds of policies and these efforts live and die in the caucus room. They don't make it out into public conversation. They don't get a public vote. So to whatever degree possible, I would strongly encourage people to use, and I'll give an example that's undoubtedly self-serving. You know, when we talk about the need for the state to engage in planning and potentially helping finance new transmission, using the words that the folks in the legislature have heard a few times of a transmission authority is helpful for them to register, oh, these other people think that's important too. So that's my offer of encouragement. And the piece on that was brought up about struggling with the local land use laws, please let me know. But we attempted to solve for a lot of that with the Getz bill, which should have removed all land use considerations for any kind of reconductoring that was occurring. So if that is not effective, please let us know, because there's clearly work to be done.
Thank you, Representative Gamba, and thank you for your leadership in the legislature on elevating the importance of transmission. Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Commissioner McNichol. Yes, we have definitely eaten our surplus resources, and we've eaten our surplus transmission capacity. And as we move forward to grow our economy and keep the lights on, we find ourselves in a position where we need to build both, along with cost-effective energy efficiency. And so we're going to spend those costs anyway, regardless, and the costs are going to go up. But the thing that Janine put in the article is that the costs aren't going up because of the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. They're for other things like wildfire and meeting other needs, not attributable to meeting our sustainability and greenhouse gas goals. So as Commissioner Apter so notably said, it's really about what's the least cost path to do that, because we still need to do it. And the energy strategy that we just published looked at that. And one of the things we looked at was the reference case, which meets our goals, and versus a limited transmission scenario where we didn't build out the transmission. And what we found was that if we didn't build out the transmission, the cost will substantially increase. And so what that really means is that the zero emission resources that we have, which are solar, wind, batteries, are the least cost resources. Being able to access them through transmission is going to be critical for us to meet that least cost path, and at the same time, keep the lights on, grow the economy, and meet our greenhouse gas emission goals.
Thank you, Alan. Super helpful addition. Any other questions or comments? Got a few more minutes.
I'm just going to jump in because
Great.
I really appreciate the response to my point. My point is more about the narrative and the words, because the words matter. And the word and the narrative that it's getting built is different than what we're talking about as people on the inside baseball. So that is my concern.
It's a great question for us to consider as kind of what role can we play to help support the communications on this important topic. Commissioner Dotson.
Thanks. Really interesting conversation. I just, one thing that just sort of leaps out to me after hearing everyone's informed views is just that no one is really talking about anything that's not an iterative, consensus-based, kind of small step approach to addressing these issues, which I think, that does tend to mute concerns about radical change or something like, I haven't heard anyone talk about, I've heard people talk about ways to strengthen and improve transmission where we can, existing right-of-ways, existing transmission, upgrading connections, not something that's like an earthquake of an approach. And I think that's also an important part of the communications about what's going on here. Maybe it's inadequate for what we really need to get done, but I think putting that in context is also an important part of this.
Thank you. Good perspective. Any other questions or comments for this last major topic? This has been a great conversation, one that I know we'll come back to because transmission is certainly something we've identified as critical, and in the roadmap to 2030, the importance of facilitating implementation of House Bill 2021 was one of our first recommendation was making sure we were doing things to support that, and it's been an issue we've recognized. So thanks for the great conversation. We will continue it. With that, I think we can go back to some slides and just look at next steps. We do not have a meeting in February. We will meet on March 13th. These are not our final agendas and topics, but we will return to the discussion about natural and working land sequestration and storage goals, as well as metrics. We will take the next step on the Tigger 2.0 project. We heard results of the modeling in, I believe, October, maybe. And we'll be talking more about, how do we approach the gaps that we see in that. We will also really dig into our 2026 work plan and biennial report. We had planned to do that during this meeting, but given the executive orders, we wanted to hear about those first and then come back to that in March and really think about our work plan. And specifically to dig in more on the development of our biennial report, which is due next December 1st. To the legislature, and thinking about what we can do between now and then and need to do between now and then to have a really good set of recommendations in the biennial report. So those are the three big topics we've got planned. We may have another topic as well. And then after the legislature concludes, we'll hear a little bit of a not an update, but kind of a what happened during the legislature and what do we think about what's coming next. We'll hear from ODOT again about the state transportation strategy and some continuing work that they're doing that we talked about in December. And we'll return to the natural working land sequestration and storage metrics. We'll report back after what we hear in March on our work plan and the biennial report. So we'll synthesize what we hear in March and come back with kind of a proposal of how we want to spend the rest of the year and some of the key steps that we need to take to develop our biennial report. So that's how we've envisioned some of the next two meetings. And if there are other thoughts that commissioners have, certainly a number of topics came up today that will need attention in the coming year. And we will try and build those into our discussion on the 13th. I had one more thought about, I guess in February, our committee, National Working Lands Committee, will be meeting with staff to kind of dig deeper on the goal recommendation and metrics discussion. So while we don't have a full commission meeting, we do have a committee meeting in February, and we'll be looking forward to hearing about that in March and April as well. So with that, I'll open up to last comments for the good of the order today from other commissioners. Seeing none, I will close the January 30th meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And just want to again thank all the commissioners as well as our invited guests and members of the public who have participated in this meeting. Really appreciate the attention and interest in climate action in Oregon. Thank you.